Chapter 807. True Lord Gu Yi, the Crimson Emperor of the Celestial Court, was one of the 9 personal disciples of the great Celestial Emperor who commanded all spirits in the South Pole to patrol the universe. He was a primordial immortal renowned for his speed among the famous great celestial generals of the Celestial Court. Because he was the personal disciple of the Crimson Emperor, although he had stepped into the realm of primordial, he was still a subject of the Celestial Court, and was willing to serve in the Celestial Court, unlike other primordial immortals who lived in seclusion in the 9 heavens or occupied territories in outer heavenly realms. As the Crimson Emperor's great Celestial Emperor's demon-slaying general, True Lord Gu Yi's daily task was to patrol the universe with his men and wander around at will. If he found a target that the Celestial Court needed to deal with, he had the power to kill him at will. When an important member of the Celestial Court summoned him with a secret spell, he had to respond quickly and lead his men to the rescue. True Lord Gu Yi was famous for his speed, and he even had the Rhino Cloak, an immortal artifact he was proud of. It was made from the feathers of more than 900 kinds of divine and immortal birds famous for their speed, and could increase his speed by more than 100 times. True Lord Gu Yi's flying speed was already much faster than Wu Qi's. With the help of the Rhino Cloak, it only took him a very short time to leave his men behind and catch up with Wu Qi. Then, he pierced Ao Buzan's neck with his spear and seriously wounded him. In the face of Wu Qi's incoming fist, True Lord Gu Yi sneered disdainfully. Roaring in a low voice, a cloak that was 1,000 feet long fluttered behind him as he spun gracefully around Wu Qi like a ghost. Wu Qi's fists could not touch him at all. Instead, it was his natal primordial immortal artifact, the Spear of Flowing Light, that kept stabbing at Wu Qi's body, leaving streaks of purple light behind it. The Rhino Cloak could instantly increase True Lord Gu Yi's speed by more than 100 times. As for the immortal Spear of Light, it was a natal primordial immortal artifact that the Celestial Court spent a great deal of resources to forge for him. It was said that with a thrust of the spear, it could catch up with the passing of time. In the blink of an eye, not only did Wu Qi fail to hit True Lord Gu Yi, but True Lord Gu Yi had stabbed him 198 times in a row. Wherever the spear's shadow passed, countless sparks splashed around Wu Qi's body, and loud clanging sounds lingered in his ears. Fortunately, he had already activated the evil dragon kill. His entire body was covered with 3 layers of purple gold dragon scales. The dragon scales with extremely high defensive power easily blocked the attack of the Flowing Light immortal spear. Not even a scratch was left on it. In the blink of an eye, Wu Qi suddenly retreated, while True Lord Gu Yi put away his spear in surprise and took a few steps back. The Rhino Cloak had a limit to the speed boost it gave True Lord Gu Yi, and the brief exchange had consumed 30% of his immortal energy. So, he had to retreat and regulate his aura. Otherwise, if he ran out of immortal energy, even a primordial immortal would be at the mercy of others, which was extremely disadvantageous to him in a battle. In particular, True Lord Gu Yi could not accept that his spear could not pierce through the scales on Wu Qi's body. He had to think about what was going on. Wu Qi took a deep breath and retreated a few miles, staring at True Lord Gu Yi in astonishment. He had thrown more than 3,000 punches at True Lord Gu Yi with all his might, and even if there was a star in front of him, he would have shattered it thousands of times. But, the fact that such a fierce attack could not touch True Lord Gu Yi at all had put Wu Qi in a difficult position. They stared at each other for a while, and then Wu Qi gave him a thumbs up and said in a deep voice, "True Lord Gu Yi? That's fast." True Lord Gu Yi nodded slowly, then slowly took off the Taotai heart-concealing armor, leaving only the cloak on his back. He laughed dryly and said, "Dragon transformation script of dragons. I don't think so. Is it the dragon kill of Deyu's secret palace? The dragon scales on your body can resist the piercing of my light. Hee, luckily I wasn't hit by your punch, or I would have been in danger." He pointed at the armor he had taken off and said frankly, "I think this immortal armor is no stronger than a piece of paper in front of you. You can pierce through it with just one punch, can't you? It's a hindrance to me, so I might as well fight you with speed. Be careful, my speed can increase by at least 10% after I take it off." Wu Qi took a deep breath, grinned coldly and said, 10% of your speed? Don't let me hit you with my punch. You'll die. The two stared at each other like fighting cocks and exchanged a few words, but neither of them had the intention to fight. Wu Qi's strength was so great that if he could hit true Lord Gu Yi with his punch, he would definitely be severely injured. But true Lord Gu Yi's speed was so fast that Wu Qi couldn't hit him. But because he was too fast, true Lord Gu Yi's spear style was the kind that would leave as soon as he touched it, so he couldn't hurt Wu Qi at all. One couldn't hit, and the other couldn't hurt. After staring at each other for a long time, true Lord Gu Yi suddenly let out a long roar and turned into a purple lightning bolt that shot toward Wu Qi's chest. The flowing light immortal spear was right in front of the lightning bolt, and true Lord Gu Yi activated the rhino cloak to deliver the most fatal blow to Wu Qi at the fastest speed. True Lord Gu Yi was full of confidence that he could pierce through Wu Qi's body with all his strength and speed. The flowing light immortal spear let out a crisp and melodious whistle as it turned blurry. The time around true Lord Gu Yi and the spear began to accelerate, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, and finally, the time around them accelerated to about 500 times. When the speed reached the limit, the flowing light immortal spear actually accelerated the flow of time, as if it wanted to catch up with the flow of time in the past. A sense of chaotic spacetime disorder made Wu Qi feel dizzy. How could he catch up with the flow of time? But true Lord Gu Yi's attack did give him such a feeling. He and the lightning bolt that came with the flowing light immortal spear had entered the void, caught up with a point in the past, and stabbed into the body of Wu Qi, who was fighting with him just a moment ago. When the spear was about a mile away from Wu Qi, a burst of blood suddenly burst out of Wu Qi's chest, and a 3-inch deep wound appeared on his chest. Wu Qi gave a loud cry. The dark-green celestial tower over his head sprayed out a large sheet of starlight that surrounded him, and the flow of time around him suddenly skyrocketed by 2,000 times. This was the fastest time that Wu Qi could control after stepping into the realm of primordial. The rapid flow of time formed an invisible space-time barrier around Wu Qi, tearing apart the connection between the outer space and the time anomaly, and turning the void into an absolute domain that was completely under Wu Qi's control. As true Lord Gu Yi rushed into the time domain controlled by Wu Qi, the flowing light immortal spear vibrated violently. The difference in the flow of time by 1,500 times had turned into a terrible time oscillation, putting great pressure on the spear. True Lord Gu Yi looked at Wu Qi in horror and exclaimed, You can control time. How many times is this? Wu Qi ignored true Lord Gu Yi's question. In the time domain controlled by Wu Qi, true Lord Gu Yi was like a rabbit caught in a quagmire, no longer able to struggle or jump. The flow of time around Wu Qi was 2,000 times faster, while that around true Lord Gu Yi was only 500 times faster. Therefore, Wu Qi's movements were much faster than true Lord Gu Yi's. In fact, Wu Qi's movements were not as fast as true Lord Gu Yi's, but with the acceleration of time, true Lord Gu Yi could not see each of Wu Qi's movements clearly. He performed an incantation gesture with both hands. Immediately, dozens of vicious curses that could weaken a person's body and make it difficult for him to move flew out from between his fingers, followed by curses that could devour blood essence, souls, flesh and internal organs, bones, and immortal energy that could burn away. A series of vicious curses from the primordial Tao of divinity shot out in the form of plumes of black smoke, attaching themselves to true Lord Gu Yi. Although they were both primordial immortals, Wu Qi's curses had caused great damage to true Lord Gu Yi. His body was rapidly rotting and deforming, and his hand could not hold on to the spear for 1/10 of a second. The spear flew out of his hand amidst a dazzling trail of purple flame, but was pulled far away by the time vortex conjured by Wu Qi. Not sure if he could kill true Lord Gu Yi, Wu Qi dared not use many of his trump cards. Instead, he kept attacking true Lord Gu Yi with various spells from De Yu's Directorate of Celestials, the power of the primordial Tao of divinity, and the power of the primordial divine runes. Countless curses and divine runes poured out of true Lord Gu Yi's body. His overall strength was rapidly weakened, and yellow blisters began to appear on his face, from which a copious amount of pus kept gushing out. Feeling excruciating pain all over his body, true Lord Gu Yi bellowed furiously, cultivating both fleshly body and magic. Your cultivation base is already at the level of Supreme Oracle. Otherwise, how could your curses hurt me? The purple flame around True Lord Gui towered into the sky. It was a wisp of pure young heavenly flame that came from beyond the 33 heavens. It possessed great power, and the pure young thunder tribulation that immortals attracted when breaking through to the next realm was actually condensed from this kind of heavenly flame. As soon as the heavenly flame appeared, the power of Wu Qi's curses was immediately weakened by 30%. Chanting the Dao League's demon-subduing mantra, True Lord Gu Yi's rhino cloak transformed into a beam of green light, wrapped around his body, and brought him flying away. Even with his eyesight, Wu Qi could not see how he disappeared. Almost instinctively, Wu Qi made a grabbing motion. A subtle aura rushed out of his palm, enveloping the rhino cloak with his thievery energy. Then, he quietly activated the myriad harmonization grand magic, sending a wisp of pure energy essence into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi felt his body lighten, and his speed suddenly increased by more than 30 times. Not only did he steal the essence of the rhino's spirit cloak, but he also absorbed a part of True Lord Gu Yi's cultivation base. With a loud laugh, Wu Qi's speed suddenly skyrocketed. He turned into a black beam and sped away. With the help of Dark Yin's celestial tower, Wu Qi suddenly caught up with True Lord Gu Yi, shoulder to shoulder. Before True Lord Gu Yi could react, Wu Qi's elbow struck him hard in the ribs. The tremendous force exploded like a bomb. A loud noise rang out from True Lord Gu Yi's fleshly body, and a dozen of his ribs were smashed by Wu Qi's elbow. Compared to the body that Wu Qi had tempered with the true body of heaven and earth scripture, dragon transformation script, and dragon kill, True Lord Gu Yi's body, which focused on speed, was still too weak. They were both primordial immortals, but if Wu Qi's body was a steel ingot, True Lord Gu Yi's was a piece of tofu. The sharp pain made True Lord Gu Yi shriek hoarsely. Glaring angrily at Wu Qi, he swung his palm toward Wu Qi's forehead. True Lord Gu Yi thrust his palm out, causing the surrounding void to collapse with a boom. A pitch-black crack in the void transformed into a sharp blade light and went straight toward Wu Qi's forehead. Wu Qi grabbed True Lord Gu Yi's rhino cloak and kicked him. The tremendous force sent him flying far away, but Wu Qi had the cloak, which kept twitching, in his hand. True Lord Gu Yi let out a long cry and gave Wu Qi a venomous glare. Then, he summoned his light flow immortal spear and sped away in a flash in a beam of flame. As a body cultivator and an immortal who focused on speed, True Lord Gu Yi was completely dominated by Wu Qi. In the end, he could only flee helplessly after being severely wounded. Then, he heard True Lord Gu Yi cry out, "Just you wait, Tan Lang, Marquis of East Sea Province. I won't let you get away with this." Sneering, Wu Qi swallowed the rhino cloak, turned, and left. Before leaving, Wu Qi pressed his palm down and smashed the outpost of the celestial court in front of him, sending tens of thousands of soldiers and generals flying thousands of miles away with their bones broken and tendons torn. Chapter 808. Up in midair, Lu Bang and his company stood foolishly on the flying ship, waiting for news from True Lord Gu Yi. After a long time, Han Xian paced impatiently on the bow of the ship. When Lu Bang saw the restless Han Xian, he smiled confidently and said, "Don't worry, True Lord Gu Yi has stepped into the realm of primordial 10,000 years ago, and he became a primordial expert through his own arduous cultivation. That boy did not achieve it by virtue of virtue. All the immortals in the universe know that a primordial expert who achieved it by virtue of virtue is at least 30% weaker than a true primordial expert. That boy is dead for sure." Han Xian's face darkened and he said nothing, while Zhang Liang and Xiao He did not look happy either. Even if Wu Qi was killed, they would have lost all their faces. How could the proud Han Xian and his company swallow the humiliation of being robbed by Wu Qi? Not being able to give Wu Qi a few slashes with their own hands was one of their biggest regrets. Just as they were struggling, a golden light flashed before their eyes, and True Lord Gu Yi, with half of his body caved in, appeared in front of them angrily. Before Lu Bang could say anything, True Lord Gu Yi roared furiously, "Why didn't King of Han tell me that guy is a freak who cultivates both magic and fleshly body? It's fine if he is just a supreme oracle or a human warrior from Hongmeng heaven, but if both of them work together, it would be easy to deal with him. Lu Bang and his company were stunned as they looked at true Lord Gu Yi, who was covered in dust and had a large part of his body caved in. True Lord Gu Yi scolded Lu Bang angrily. If Wu Qi were just an ordinary supreme oracle, he was confident that he could pierce Wu Qi's heart with a spear. If Wu Qi were just an ordinary human warrior from Hongmeng heaven, with his terrifying speed, true Lord Gu Yi could still beat Wu Qi to a pulp. But Wu Qi was a freak who combined both of them. Not only did he possess incredible physical strength, but he could also control the flow of time, which limited true Lord Gu Yi's greatest advantage, his incredible speed. Therefore, true Lord Gu Yi could only suffer defeat in front of Wu Qi. A body cultivator like true Lord Gu Yi, who focused on speed, would have a great advantage if he were to fight a supreme oracle or a human warrior from Hongmeng heaven. With his insane speed, even if he couldn't defeat the enemy, he would be able to tie them down. As long as the Sky Patrol army that he led arrived, thousands of people would be able to set up the Scarlet Scorching Sky Demon Vanquishing formation that was created by the Scarlet Arch, and they would be able to kill the enemy. But, a man like Wu Qi, who cultivated both fleshly body and magic, and possessed a supreme-grade supreme tower that could control time, was his absolute nemesis. Suppressing his speed by controlling the flow of time, and then dealing a fatal blow to true Lord Gu Yi with his absolute advantage in strength, was definitely the enemy that true Lord Gu Yi feared the most. But, there were a few freaks who cultivated both fleshly body and magic in Deyu Dynasty. They were now the top figures of Deyu's Directorate of Celestials and the Secret Palace, and revered elders of the Secret Palace. They did not leave Liangzhu easily, and true Lord Gu Yi never dreamed that he would run into one of them. Seeing true Lord Gu Yi beaten to such a state, Lu Bang was so scared that his claws went numb. Unlike Lu Bang, an unfavored son, true Lord Gu Yi was one of Crimson Emperor's 9 most capable personal disciples, and one of the 9 famous evil-slaying generals of the Celestial Court. Unlike Lu Bang, who was an immortal king with a title but no real power, true Lord Gu Yi's army of Celestial Court consisted of 3 celestial patrolling armies, each of which had 9 armies and 18 battalions of celestial soldiers and celestial generals, with a total of 1 billion soldiers. Because Lu Bang had provided the wrong information, true Lord Gu Yi was seriously wounded. At the thought that Crimson Emperor might be angry because of this, Lu Bang had an impulse to pass out. A fierce gleam flashed in Lu Bang's eyes, and he even had the thought of killing true Lord Gu Yi. If not for the fact that true Lord Gu Yi was not someone he could deal with, he would have killed him by now. Staring blankly at the seriously wounded true Lord Gu Yi, Lu Bang suddenly cried out in a hoarse voice, Senior brother Gu Yi, please listen to me." Sobbing bitterly, Lu Bang threw his arms around true Lord Gu Yi and burst into tears. "Senior brother, please listen to me. You can't blame me for this." Sob, the 3 primordial immortals sent by the Celestial Court to the mortal world, the 3 Buddhas sent by the Buddhist League, and a fiend immortal sent by the great fiend emperor of the fiend realm. They were all killed by that boy. But, I really didn't know he had such a strong strength before this. True Lord Gu Yi shuddered. He wished he could stab Lu Bang to death with his Lightstream immortal spear, even though Lu Bang was his master's son. Wu Qi killed 7 primordial immortals alone. Why didn't you tell me earlier? What a bastard. Are you afraid you won't die soon enough? True Lord Gu Yi wanted to cry but had no tears as he stroked his injured ribs. An ordinary primordial immortal would not be able to recover from such an injury without spending a few periods of hard cultivation. True Lord Gu Yi had a good master who could eat all kinds of supreme-grade primordial immortal pills like sweets. It would only take him a few months to fully recover. But, he had the Rhino Cloak, the cloak that could increase his speed by 100 times in a short period of time. It was extremely difficult to gather the feathers of hundreds of divine and immortal birds that were famous for their speed, and some of them even came from the mount of a Taoist patriarch, Crimson Emperor's master, who was also one of the backers of the Celestial Court. It took Crimson Emperor a great favor to pluck 3 of the longest tail feathers from that mount, whose cultivation base was not much weaker than Crimson Emperor's. Yet, Wu Qi had snatched away such an important treasure. It pained true Lord Gui so much that he wanted to add hundreds of holes to Lu Bang's body. Golden ripples rolled down from the sky, including heavenly flowers, golden lotuses, golden lamps, golden bells, and many other unusual phenomena. A gentle and mysterious aura enveloped the mortal world. The real almighty experts of Taoist League and Buddhist League had arrived. Nothing could go wrong in the mortal world. On average, there was a chance to safely break through to the realm of primordial every half an eon, so this was a place where nothing could go wrong. True Lord Gui, Lu Bang, and the others dropped to their knees at the same time, bowing deeply and not daring to be negligent. Endless immortal energy and Buddhist energy swept across the void, replacing the sweating Buddha Futu and forcibly restoring the laws of heaven and earth that were about to disintegrate. A brand new planet and a satellite emerged out of thin air, looking no different from the original planet and satellite. Tens of thousands of small human tribes, each with a population of only 1,000 or so, were thrown into the lush jungles and flat grasslands of this new planet. These human tribes, who were still in the primitive stage, had no idea that they had changed their living environment. Beaming with joy, they began a new cycle of life on this planet. Whether it was the almighty experts of Taoist League or Buddhist League, they all sat cross-legged on lotus thrones of different colors. A total of 72 lotus thrones hovered in the void, with 72 almighty experts of Taoist League and Buddhist League whispering to each other. The name, Tan Lang, Marquis of East Sea Province, appeared vaguely in the void, and then disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi did not know what had happened in the void after he left, nor did he know that he had been listed by the higher-ups of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League, and that the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League had issued a bounty against him at the same time. He had Kunwu swords and mastered the fiend-slaying sword formation, and he deserved to die. On top of that, he had killed 7 primordial experts, and this was what he had done when he had just stepped into the realm of primordial. How could they not punish him? If they did not kill such a man as soon as possible, would they allow him to continue to cause greater losses to the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League? Even the 9 fiend emperors and 72 fiend kings of the fiend realm had issued a bounty against Wu Qi. If the immortals of the Fiend League could kill Wu Qi or his relatives and friends, they would be rewarded with a territory of different sizes in the Fiend realm, depending on how important these people were. Wu Qi did not know about these things, so he flew back to Panga continent in a good mood. Along the way, he devoured and fused the rhino cloak, fusing its existence into his divine soul. He now had the terrible ability to speed up 100 times in a short time, which was definitely a freakish ability. With his current strength, if he could speed up 100 times in a short time, he was confident that he could even threaten an 8th-tier primordial expert. Now that he had stepped into the realm of 9th-tier primordial, obtained the complete legacy of Scroll of Stealing, and possessed the first wisp of innate thievery energy, Wu Qi no longer needed to worry about his future cultivation base. According to the shadowy figure's experience, if Wu Qi kept going step by step, he would be able to step into the realm of Tao breaking in just a few decades, and the realm of Tao fusing in just a few hundred years. He no longer needed to worry about his own cultivation base. He needed to improve the cultivation base of the people around him. Lu Qingfeng was Wu Qi's best brother, the most reliable and capable man around him. His cultivation base was so low that Wu Qi was too embarrassed to mention it. Another example was Yen Bugui. Although he had changed his cultivation base to the true body of heaven and earth scripture, his cultivation base had not even reached the level of first Panga heaven. Lord Xiansheng, Catfish, El Buzan, Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, Silver Feather, even Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other old immortals, the many disciples of Underhand Sect, Supremacy 3 Flame, his friend in adversity, and Huang Liang, a loyal subordinate whom he had recruited along the way. What kind of overall strength did they have? Although there were many of them, their overall strength was so weak that it made Wu Qi's heart ache. More importantly, although Princess Zhanglu had awakened her primordial bloodline and even formed the golden body of the god of Scourge, her cultivation base was only about the same as a lower-tier gold immortal. By relying on the bizarre and unpredictable primordial divine power, she could deal with some weak enemies. But, as his lover, if he could not elevate her to the realm of primordial, Wu Qi would not feel at ease leaving her alone in the East Sea province. What kind of people had Wu Qi offended now? He had thoroughly offended the Lord Buddha, Amitabha, brutally beaten true Lord Gu Yi, robbed Lu Bang until he was left with nothing but his underpants, and thoroughly offended the Red Emperor, one of the 5 celestial emperors of the 5 directions. Now that he had killed King Tang Qiu in public, needless to say, King Baishan was now thinking about him. If he could not instigate Emperor Haozuan to kill King Baishan, he would have to be careful of King Baishan's revenge. Counting with his fingers, the whole world was filled with his enemies. I'm such a failure as a human being. Why do I suddenly have so many enemies? With a wry smile on his face, he patted the empty Darkeen celestial tower, turned it back into a clump of chaotic energy, and swallowed it back into his stomach. After thinking for a long time, he sighed helplessly and said, "Yu Xiong Plain, oh Yu Xiong Plain, I'll have to rely on you. Whether I, Wu Qi, can turn over a new leaf and become a phoenix, all depends on you." Wu Qi shuddered at the thought of the endless natural energy beneath Yu Xiong Plain, and the enormous spirit cave, which was said to be Saint Panga's heart. He did not need a lot, but just 1/1000th of the natural energy in that spirit cave could produce at least 3 to 5 primordial experts and a large group of gold immortals. Wu Qi was not greedy. Really, he would be satisfied if he could produce 3 to 5 primordial experts. 3 plus 5. Excluding himself, there were at most 8 people. He was really not greedy. Chapter 809. Wu Qi was struck dumb. How could he be the 79th person to do such a stupid thing? If I may ask, what about the 78th seniors? He asked dryly. Wu Qi's scalp went numb at the mention of the grand sacrifice to heaven and earth and the human emperor's banquet. But now that he had plenty of experience, he knew he would not suffer too much during the banquet. With Emperor Haozuan's decree, Wu Qi could bring no more than 10,000 relatives and maids to live in Liangzhu with him, as the king of East Sea's upper-grade prefecture. The 2 palaces chosen by De Yu's eunuchs for Wu Qi had a good location and scenery. In total, the palaces had more than 30 halls and hundreds of ancillary buildings. They were not far from each other, located on both sides of a great river, and connected by a stone bridge. Dozens of manors were dotted around the palaces. No matter how hard he racked his brains, he could not imagine how powerful this formation was, nor could he imagine how much resources it would take to construct it. Apart from Yu Xiong Plain, where the natural energy was limitless, he could not think of any other place that could support the energy consumption of such a formation. Perhaps even a first-tier primordial immortal would be killed by the power unleashed by such a formation, wouldn't it? The king of East Sea's prefecture. Wu Qi was struck dumb. He was conferred the title of king just like that. And a hereditary king of De Yu's prefecture, one of the 4 grades of mountain, water, prefecture, and city. Although it was the lowest rank, 9 state king, it was still an upper-class state king among the upper and lower rank, 9 nobles. This meant that he had the direct jurisdiction of 2 other large states. After hesitating for a while, Emperor Haozuan shook his head and said, "The king of East Sea's prefecture king need not intervene in the matter of King Baishan. I'll talk to him." With these 2 palaces of Emperor Haozuan, Wu Qi was qualified to bring a certain number of relatives and subordinates to live in Liangzhu. The palaces and manors outside Liangzhu could not be bought with money. Apart from the natives who had lived here for generations, they could only be bought with rewards from Emperor Haozuan. Owning their own palaces and manors outside of Liangzhu city meant that they had the right to stay in Liangzhu city, which meant that they had become the true ministers of De Yu. Beads of cold sweat were breaking out from Wu Qi's body. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out from his mouth. After taking out the medallion that allowed him to see Emperor Haozuan at any time, Wu Qi showed it to the old oracle. The old oracle waved his hand, and a few black-clad eunuchs came to greet Wu Qi and led him slowly into the palace. Emperor Haozuan burst out laughing, nodded, and said, "No matter what, you have done a great service. Pass down the decree, you are now the Marquis of East Sea Province, the 9th grade upper grade king of East Sea Province." In addition to the fiefdom of the East Sea Province, 2 provinces near the East Sea Province will be chosen as the territories under the direct jurisdiction of the King of East Sea Province. Emperor Haozuan was obviously very satisfied with what Wu Qi had done in the past few days. Proud of himself, he clapped his hands and said with a smile, "I'm very happy that the King of East Sea Province has done such a great service. Servants, prepare a feast." "That's all." Emperor Haozuan jumped to his feet in surprise and cried out, "You killed the 7 primordial immortals?" There was still a month and a half before the next grand sacrificial ceremony, and Wu Qi had to be there on time to complete the legal formalities to confer him the title of King of East Sea Province. Take Bo Zhongfu, the current prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, for example. Although he was the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, he also had his own mansion in Liangzhu, and he was considered a minister. Laughing strangely, the old oracle raised his finger and said, "Marquis is one of the 79 Deyu oracles who broke through the realm of oracles and came to the imperial palace. Well, he is also the only one who is not injured. Cultivating both fleshly body and magic is indeed extraordinary." As soon as he emerged from the void, dozens of terrible divine senses immediately locked onto Wu Qi. 12 dark supreme towers appeared silently around Wu Qi, completely sealing off space and time, and the natural energy disappeared without a trace in that instant. The space around Wu Qi had become an absolute vacuum, and even space and time no longer existed. This was just the power on the surface. Wu Qi had not seen any white-robed oracles from the secret palace. The secret palace was the place where the most powerful forces of Deyu were gathered, and the craziest, and strongest monsters of Deyu were all hiding in it. Glancing around, Wu Qi could not tell that Liangzhu had such an abnormal defense. He only knew that the imperial palace was extremely well defended, but he did not expect that the imperial palace was so heavily guarded. As a primordial immortal who had just become a primordial immortal, he was almost seriously injured by the aura of these oracles on duty. This was too outrageous. The old oracle shook his head and laughed. "It's nothing. The shortest one has been lying in bed for half a year, and the longest one has only rested for 3 years. Well, when Marquis has his own clan in the future, I'll have to remind my children that even if they have a divine cultivation base, they should not come to the imperial palace like this. Not only will they frighten the oracles on duty, they will also frighten themselves. That's not good." After hurriedly arranging the complicated affairs of the territory, Wu Qi immediately announced that he would go into seclusion to stabilize his cultivation base. Then, together with Princess Zhanglu, they went into the underground palace under the palace, which was specially built for cultivation. A deep bell rang out in the imperial palace. Tens of thousands of black-robed oracles of Deyu rose into the sky from all over Liangzhu. Their terrible auras merged into one, slowly rising from the ground like a great mountain. A terrible pressure that could destroy everything came pressing down on Wu Qi silently, making his bones creak. He almost could not withstand the pressure and was about to be completely crushed. A formation with a circumference of nearly 100 million miles. Was this still the old, closed, rigid, and lifeless Liangzhu? The speed of the city's reaction surprised Wu Qi. Even if a dozen primordial experts were to invade it at the same time, they would be killed in an instant, wouldn't they? At the very least, he could see large runes and patterns of formations beginning to flash on the ground with the imperial palace as the center. It was a terrible formation, nearly 100 million miles in circumference, laid out with the whole of Liangzhu as its center. He never dreamed that Liangzhu's defense was so terrible. He just wanted to save time, so he came out from not far from the imperial palace. But he never thought that his appearance would cause such a huge reaction. "This is the Kunwu divine weapon given by the sacred emperor," Wu Qi explained hurriedly. "It has nothing to do with me." In the great hall, Wu Qi saw Emperor Haozuan again. He was sitting on the throne as usual, dressed in the same clothes. Does this Emperor Haozuan sit there all year round without eating, drinking, bathing, and never go out to pay his respects? Wu Qi wondered maliciously. Leaving behind 2 blood-draining celestial fiends to confuse the enemies, Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu plunged into the depths of Yuxiong Plain, 100 million miles beneath it. As a result, the enormous pressure dissipated in an instant, and all the oracles returned to their posts. The huge runes and diagrams on the ground were extinguished one by one, and the deep, powerful ringing of bells faded away. The old oracle grinned, nodded at Wu Qi, and said, "Congratulations on your success in your cultivation base, Marquis of East Sea Province. Well, you've really reached the realm of supreme oracles, and your fleshly body has reached the realm of Hongmeng Panga heaven. No wonder you didn't die just now. Cultivating both fleshly body and magic is really good." Wu Qi hurriedly bowed his head and bowed respectfully to Emperor Haozuan. After bidding farewell to the emperor, Wu Qi followed the few eunuchs out of the hall. Wu Qi swallowed a mouthful of saliva and laughed dryly. The manor was 100,000 miles away from Liangzhu, a distance that could be covered by a single step for someone like Wu Qi, and according to De Yu's classification, it was still in the outskirts of Liangzhu, an excellent location. The dozens of manors covered a total of millions of acres of fertile farmland, and produced a bountiful annual yield. Together with the manors, hundreds of villages and towns where the land was planted were given to Wu Qi, and all the people in them became Wu Qi's subjects. Just as Wu Qi was about to be crushed by the tremendous pressure, a black-robed oracle suddenly appeared on the supreme tower facing Wu Qi. The white-haired old oracle gave Wu Qi a blank look, carefully distinguishing his appearance and aura, then slowly raised his right hand and waved gently. Emperor Haozuan burst into laughter. He made no secret of his admiration for Wu Qi. With a smile, he asked Wu Qi to tell him everything in detail, and he kept asking Wu Qi about the details. When Wu Qi told him that he was chased by true Lord Gu Yi on his way back, and that he had severely wounded the man with a single blow, the emperor cheered and rewarded Wu Qi with 2 palaces and dozens of manors outside Liangzhu. The eunuchs of De Yu dynasty were very efficient. Just as Emperor Haozuan was conferring Wu Qi as the king of East Sea Prefecture, the imperial edict and medallions for Wu Qi's promotion had been prepared, including the title deeds of 2 palaces and dozens of manors, all of which had been handed over to Wu Qi. Moreover, these eunuchs told Wu Qi that his promotion was a special edict, and that he would have to attend the next heaven and earth sacrificial ceremony held by De Yu dynasty, for he would have to pray to heaven and earth, announce his promotion to all the ghosts and deities, and receive the human emperor's banquet. After a brief pause, Wu Qi hurriedly bowed and thanked Emperor Haozuan. The power of the stars, natural energy, and Pangu's sacred energy poured down like a waterfall from the 9 heavens, fusing into Emperor Haozuan's body. Emperor Haozuan squinted at Wu Qi with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. "Congratulations, Marquis of East Sea Prefecture. Well, how did you break through the path of ingress in such a short time?" When he said that, Emperor Haozuan's face turned ferocious, and the armrest of his throne was crushed to pieces. As soon as he said the word banquet, Wu Qi's face turned pale, and the emperor's face turned extremely unsightly. He quickly corrected himself and said, "Ha! I think the king of East Sea Prefecture is tired, so you'd better go back and rest quickly." "Well, if that king of Han dares to come back, the king of East Sea Prefecture will have to keep a close eye on him." As for King Baishan. Wu Qi bowed to Emperor Haozuan and told him what he had done in the past few days. Of course, he mainly mentioned that he had killed 7 primordial immortals and destroyed a small world in the mortal world, but avoided mentioning that he had robbed Buddha Futu, Lu Bang, and the others. After all, it was not a glorious thing to do, was it not? About a mile above the gate of De Yu Imperial Palace, a piece of blue sky about 10 feet in circumference suddenly collapsed, and Wu Qi strode out of it. Chapter 8:10. With the help of the endless natural energy in Yuxiong Plain, the people around Wu Qi were undergoing earth-shaking transformations. Meanwhile, Princess Zhang Li's understanding of the primordial Tao of divinity was constantly being transmitted to Wu Qi, comparing it with everything Wu Qi knew, deepening their understanding of the heavenly Tao. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other orthodox immortals were solemnly listening to Wu Qi teach them the innate pure Yang universal scripture, a primordial scripture from the sovereign of myriad immortal alliance. At the same time, wisps of the divine flame of great tranquility kept flickering around them, injecting an enormous amount of natural energy into their bodies. They did not need to spend any effort to absorb the energy to improve their cultivation base, as all they needed to do was to comprehend the boundless magic Wu Qi taught them. Naturally, no one cared about that, and no one would notice it. But, Wu Qi was crazily plundering the natural energy in this boundless ocean of natural energy. It was like someone drinking a small mouthful of water from the Pacific Ocean. No one noticed what he was doing underground. There was still a month and a half before Wu Qi would participate in the ritual. In other words, with the 2,000-fold acceleration of time that Wu Qi could control, he had 3,000 months to cultivate in seclusion. 3,000 months, or 250 years. This was the main reason why Du forbade any immortals from getting close to the area 10 billion miles around Yuxiong Plain without permission. As long as any immortal sneaked into Yuxiong Plain and entered the depths, he would be able to use the endless natural energy to cultivate as much as he wanted. However, the amount of natural energy under Yuxiong Plain was too much to count, and Du had no way to monitor its flow. Therefore, to prevent any immortals from using the natural energy to strengthen themselves, Du simply sealed off Yuxiong Plain. Unless it was an envoy of the celestial court like Liu Bang, he would kill any immortal who dared to approach Yuxiong Plain. 100 million miles below Yuxiong Plain, the concentration of natural energy and Panga's sacred energy had reached a level that almost drove Wu Qi crazy. Had he ever seen crystallized natural energy and Panga's sacred energy? The underground here was filled with such perverted existences. In the liquid spiritual energy sea, there were energy crystals of different sizes, tens of thousands of miles in radius. Some of them had been compressed and condensed to the extreme. The energy contained in them was so strong that the leaking energy waves could even distort the surrounding space. Only the supreme oracles of Du had the privilege to enter the Yuxiong Plains at any time and absorb the natural energy and Panga's sacred energy here. All the major clans in Liangzhu had supreme oracles, so they always had many experts in their clans. This had also maintained the status and power of Du clan on Panga continent. Now that Wu Qi was also a supreme priest and had been conferred the title of King of the East Sea Prefecture, even if he was discovered to be frantically plundering the spiritual energy underground, the outsiders would just turn a blind eye to it. As the divine flame of great tranquility slowly fused into their bodies, Supremacy 3 Flame, who was standing next to them, was surrounded by a green, glass-like flame. Supremacy 3 Flame was very talented when it came to playing with fire, and he had already begun to master the magical ability of this innate divine flame. In the future, Wu Qi's underhand sect would certainly have another expert in alchemy. Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu sat cross-legged on a purple crystal that measured more than 100,000 miles in diameter, their bodies crazily absorbing the natural energy around them like black holes. Meanwhile, 108 Kunwu swords formed the fiend-slaying sword formation to devour the surrounding natural energy, purifying it and injecting it directly into their bodies. Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli's divine souls were closely connected, and Wu Qi was constantly transmitting all the insights he had gained after stepping into the realm of primordial to Princess Zhonglu, consuming his own blood essence and divine soul to forcibly improve the realm and cultivation base of Princess Zhongli's divine soul. At the bottom of Dark Yin's celestial tower, Wu Qi had opened up a herb garden that measured hundreds of thousands of miles in circumference. A few blood-draining celestial fiends were carefully taking care of the various herbs planted in it. From time to time, Princess Zhonglu would stop her cultivation and come to the herb garden to help. With the help of her divine power, the spirit herbs were growing very well, and the ingredients needed to concoct some basic life-prolonging pills were plentiful. In this way, the millions of soldiers of the East Sea no longer had to worry about their lifespans running out when they left Dark Yin's celestial tower. Even emissaries of the celestial court like Liu Bang were under Dayu's surveillance at all times. They could use the rich natural energy above ground to cultivate, but if they dared to sneak into the ground, they would immediately be violently suppressed by Dayu. With Wu Qi's efforts, his power was growing rapidly. In hundreds of huge halls, millions of soldiers of the East Sea were undergoing brutal training. With the cruel physical training and constant brainwashing, Wu Qi was confident that when these soldiers left Dark Yin's celestial tower and ended their 250-year training, they would be ready to die for him at any time. Among these soldiers, many had excellent aptitudes, and the cultivation technique of the human race was the fastest. In just a dozen years, some of them had broken through the realm of Panga heaven, which shocked even Wu Qi. Suddenly, Wu Qi understood why you could cultivate a large number of powerful soldiers and oracles in a short period of time when he needed them. If it were not for the fact that the lifespan of the human race limited this method of accelerating time, perhaps you would have become a place where primordial immortals roamed, and gold immortals were as common as dogs. Would anyone care if there was a drop of water missing from the Pacific Ocean? Of course, although the number of soldiers in Wu Qi's Dark-Yin Celestial Tower was slightly larger, which clan of Dayu did not secretly train more powerful private armies for themselves? Not to mention others, Gao alone had millions of soldiers under his command, all of whom had been approved by the human emperor. So, how did he train these millions of soldiers? Everyone was well aware of this. Lord Xiansheng, Catfish, the Dragon King of the East Sea, and many other aquatic demons, as long as they had the potential to cultivate into true dragons, had all gathered around a clone. The clone was practicing the dragon transformation script, teaching them all the mystic arts of dragons. Ao Buzan was sitting lazily off to one side, cultivating on his own while giving them some advice from time to time. Every word he said was just right, awakening the hearts of these aquatic demons like the morning bell. Under the guidance of Wu Qi, and having inherited the complete primordial Tao of divinity, Princess Zhonglu had a bright and smooth path in front of her. She only needed to spend a little time and stride down this path, and then she would be able to advance to the realm of primordial, which was the level of the ancient gods, so-called innate ancient gods. All she lacked was the accumulation of divine power, and that was what Wu Qi's cultivation technique was best at. On top of that, Wu Qi had the myriad harmonization grand magic, which not only allowed him to devour foreign objects to nourish himself, but could also reverse the cultivation technique and transfer all of his energy to Princess Zhonglu. An enormous amount of energy essence and the enlightenment of the heavenly Tao were constantly injected into Princess Zhongli's body. Her level of understanding of the primordial Tao of divinity was steadily rising, and her understanding of the primordial Tao of divinity was getting deeper and deeper. The various mystic arts of the primordial Tao of divinity she mastered were also getting stronger and stronger. Inside Dark-Yin Celestial Tower, apart from the 2 blood-draining celestial gods, some of the other 16 blood-draining celestial gods had taken the form of Wu Qi, sitting cross-legged in various halls of the tower with solemn expressions, teaching Wu Qi the various scriptures of the primordial Tao of divinity to different targets. Wu Qi opened his interstitial world. Chaotic energy poured out wildly, plundering the energy crystals that were drifting and colliding with each other like mountains. Oh heavens, there were tens of thousands of miles of crystalline energy and Panga's sacred energy. Wu Qi's eyes turned green as he excitedly swallowed one energy crystal after another into his interstitial world. At the same time, he kept exercising the myriad harmonization grand magic to absorb the vast and endless energy around him. The cultivation techniques of the human race were easy to master, and with the help of the Supreme Tower, perhaps in just 3 to 5 days in the outside world, you could cultivate a large number of gold immortals. It was no wonder you could fight against the Celestial Court for so many years without falling. Even the human wave attack was enough to give the Celestial Court a headache. It took eons of time for a gold immortal to cultivate, but you could cultivate gold immortal warriors and oracles like leeks in the field, harvesting them in just 3 to 5 days. The difference in their combat potential was too obvious. Lord Buddha's Great Light Indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture contained the supreme divine ability of the Buddhist League, the Great Light Amitabha Universal Enlightenment. It was the divine ability that Lord Buddha had once used on the severely wounded Buddha Phutu. It allowed him to inject his own cultivation base, magic power, and blood essence into the target's body. It was not enough to describe what Wu Qi was feeling now as a mouse falling into a rice barn. He produced Dark-Yin Celestial Tower and plundered the surrounding energy to his heart's content, but it did not reduce at all. All the disciples of Underhand's sect, all the people around Wu Qi, and the million-strong army carefully selected from the East Sea province were hidden in Dark-Yin Celestial Tower by Wu Qi. As for the disciples of Underhand sect, the disciples of the human race were gathered in a great hall, listening to the teachings of various mystic arts, while the disciples of the demon race were being taught the mystic arts of the demon race. The shadowy figure had given Wuqi the complete inheritance of Scroll of Stealing, which contained the natal divine abilities of all the great ancient demons, so it was appropriate to teach them to the disciples of the demon race. Some of the demon disciples Wuqi had recruited actually had the faint bloodline of ancient demons. In just a dozen years, they had awakened their bloodline, and naturally, their cultivation bases had improved by leaps and bounds. The momentum of their rapid progress was astonishing. From time to time, Wuqi would personally enlighten Lu Qingfeng, Yan Bugui, and those close to him, forcibly improving their cultivation bases. In just a few years, he had brought Lu Qingfeng, Yan Bugui, and others to the realm of heaven immortals, and after that, their cultivation bases improved by leaps and bounds. If it were not for the fact that Diyu was conservative and traditional, and only guarded Pangu continent as his territory, the celestial court would have been destroyed by Diyu a long time ago. The sticky liquid energy and Pangu's sacred energy rushed into Dark Yin's celestial tower, catching the millions of people in the tower off guard and drowning them in the liquid energy. Countless people were thrown and rolled around by the torrent of energy, and some even screamed for help. The Dark Yin's celestial tower was plunged into chaos in an instant. But soon, these people found out what exactly was pouring into the tower. Before the soldiers of East Sea Province could figure it out, Patriarch Jiang Yun, Lord Xiansheng, Supremacy Three Flame, and the other immortals had already exclaimed and sat down cross-legged in ecstasy, entering into a deep state of cultivation. Chapter 8:11. After spending a month and a half cultivating in seclusion underground, Wuqi returned to the surface alone to participate in the deadly heaven-worshipping ceremony, where Emperor Haozun officially announced that he was conferred the title of King of East Sea Prefecture. The fact that he had single-handedly killed 7 primordial immortals had been confirmed, and both the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League had officially sent an official document to Diyu. Therefore, the promotion of Wuqi was unanimously approved by all the civil and military officials in the imperial court. Except for King Baishan, whose whereabouts were unknown, no one objected to Wuqi's promotion. The slightly interesting news was that Diyu, as usual, ignored the official documents sent by the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. After Liu Bang left the imperial palace, Emperor Haozun rewarded 2 official scrolls made of rare materials, such as the silk of 10,000-year-old heavenly silkworms, to a chief eunuch. The chief eunuch, who was in charge of Emperor Haozun's daily meals, happily made the 2 scrolls into a pair of fine socks. This was Diyu's attitude. After the protests from the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League, Diyu had returned to his original track, moving forward according to the old tradition. Wuqi held a banquet in his palace, inviting Gao, King Yufeng, and a group of people close to him to drink for 3 days and 3 nights. After that, he went back to his secluded cultivation. The excuse he gave to the public was that he had just stepped into the realm of Supreme Oracle, and needed to stabilize his cultivation base while studying some supreme mystic arts provided by the secret palace. It was a real excuse, for after learning that Wuqi had broken through the realm of Supreme Oracle, the first master of the secret palace had given Wuqi countless mystic arts, each of which was extremely exquisite and powerful. Meanwhile, Liu Bang stayed quietly in Chang'e Palace, drinking and making merry every day and never running around again. Wuqi had assigned some soldiers to keep an eye on him in shifts. Just like that, the days went by. In a great hall about 100 miles long and wide in Dark Yin's celestial tower, the light curtain constructed by Princess Zhanglu, which was a combination of 49,000 ancient runes and primordial Tao of divinity, kept vibrating and producing dull, loud noises. Wuqi was bare-chested, his hair disheveled as he laughed and waved his fists to clash with a silver halberd and a black knife that were thrusting toward him. The man was Lord Xiansheng, who was holding a silver halberd that kept drawing dazzling silver rainbows in the air. After hundreds of years of hard cultivation, the mystic arts of dragons that Wuqi had taught him, and the fact that Wuqi had forcibly imbued him with his own blood essence, he had firmly stepped into the realm of first-tier gold immortal. Lord Xiansheng's understanding of the laws of heavenly Tao was obviously not enough, but he was a body cultivator. As long as the strength of his fleshly body was improved, it was possible for him to break through the realm by force. This extreme method of cultivation would bring him a lot of trouble when he broke through the realm of primordial in the future, but it was undoubtedly the best choice for him to improve his overall strength quickly. The halberd in Lord Xianqing's hand was a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact that Wu Qi had forged for him. It was so powerful that it could split the sky with a single strike. After looting Buddha Futu and the 7 primordial experts, as well as Lu Bang and the others, Wu Qi had looted countless rare materials from Wu Qi. Then, he found dozens of innate energies in the huge spirit cave beneath Yuxiong Plain, which he injected into Lord Xianqing's silver halberd. With that, he made it into a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact for the time being. Once Lord Xianqing broke through the realm, he could nourish the halberd with his blood essence and divine soul, and when the time was right, it would become a primordial divine artifact. The halberd let out a deep dragon roar as it thrust toward Wu Qi. Countless silver rainbows swept across Wu Qi like a storm. Like true Lord Gu Yi, Lord Xianqing walked the path of extreme speed. But, unlike true Lord Gu Yi, as a member of the dragons, his fleshly body was much stronger than true Lord Gu Yi's. Once he stepped into the realm of primordial, his physical strength would be at least 1,000 times stronger than true Lord Gu Yi. This was the innate talent of the dragons, and no one could be blamed for it. Therefore, Lord Xianqing had true Lord Gu Yi's speed, but not his physical strength. Once he stepped into the realm of primordial, he would be even more terrifying than true Lord Gu Yi. Even now, if Wu Qi did not use the rhino cloak, his speed would not be able to keep up with Lord Xianqing, and every blow from Lord Xianqing made Wu Qi's fists ache, the numbness and swelling feeling spread from his wrists to his elbows. Sweating profusely, Lord Xianqing laughed wildly as he attacked Wu Qi with all his might. What a great thing it was to have Wu Qi, a primordial expert, to fight with him every day. For primordial experts who stood high above the masses, it was impossible for those primordial experts in the world of 9 heavens to condescend to fight with their own disciples like this, not even their own personal disciples. Every move of a primordial expert contained the heavenly secret, so when Lord Xianqing fought Wu Qi head-on, each of Wu Qi's punches gave him a refreshing feeling. And he did not need to worry that he would hurt Wu Qi, for he could fight with all his might. Every blow he struck with all his strength, every blow used up all his understanding of the heavenly Tao, and every blow he struck out with all his strength, spirit, and energy. This was also one of the reasons why Lord Xianqing could make such rapid progress. With a primordial expert as his practice target, it would be embarrassing if he made slow progress. A series of deafening booms rang out as Lord Xianqing laughed wildly and unleashed another wave of 7,200 stabs. The dense beams of silver light turned into a sheet of silver light without the slightest gap, enveloping Wu Qi in it. With a serious face, Wu Qi met the attack with both fists. He successfully intercepted 7,125 of the attacks, but the remaining 75 attacks were beyond Wu Qi's speed limit and hit Wu Qi's body. Sparks flew in all directions. Ao Buzan, who was glaring at Wu Qi with a black knife in his hand, laughed wildly and swung it toward his lower body. "Damn it, Lao Tzu will stab you to death with this spear." Standing 23 feet tall and staring at a black dragon head, Ao Buzan, who had yet to fully transform into his human form, swung his specially made machete that was 32 feet long, which looked like a large door, and brought it down excitedly. It was a divine weapon that Wu Qi had crafted for him, and it was only a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact at the moment. When Ao Buzan, who was now a peak-level gold immortal, stepped into the primordial realm, as long as he worked hard to refine it with his own blood essence and divine soul, he would be able to upgrade it into a primordial divine weapon. However, out of Ao Buzan's bad taste, he strongly requested Wu Qi to craft a black spear for him. In this way, whenever he faced a female enemy, he could shout, "Lao Tzu will stab you to death with this spear," which would give Ao Buzan a strong sense of pleasure. However, Wu Qi did not satisfy Ao Buzan's bad taste. Gnashing his teeth, he crafted the black machete for Ao Buzan. Ao Buzan was a little resentful about this. Therefore, every time he fought with Wu Qi, he would attack Wu Qi without holding back, aiming at Wu Qi's crotch, or occasionally taking care of Wu Qi's face. That was because he wanted to slap Wu Qi's face into a big pancake, to get back at Ao Buzan for not being able to stab people to his heart's content. Despite being a peak-level gold immortal, Ao Buzan still could not completely transform into his human form. Although Ao Buzan did not seem to care about this, Wu Qi and others began to speculate about his origin. Everyone knew that the more ancient a divine beast's bloodline was, the harder it was to transform into a human form. However, even little Kei, who was raised by Princess Xianglu, had transformed into a pretty girl, and only Ao Buzan, who had the highest cultivation base, still had a dragon head on his head. What exactly was his origin? Glaring at Ao Buzan, Wu Qi raised his leg and kicked the machete back. Then, with his left hand, he thrust out a palm thunder. 1,000 feet long golden thunderbolt, accompanied by countless thunderbolts and flames of 5 elements, roared out and struck Ao Buzan, causing him to howl miserably and retreat in a sorry state. Even the most ordinary palm thunder had a terrible lethality in Wu Qi's hand. Just a casual strike of it contained all 5 elements, and the energies of 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other, which gave it a great power. Ao Buzan had the cultivation base of a peak-level gold immortal, and the defense of his dragon scales was comparable to a supreme-grade gold immortal item. But still, Wu Qi's attack shattered his scales and sent his flesh flying in all directions. Ao Buzan was in so much pain that tears rolled down his cheeks. Then, he swung his machete and slashed at Wu Qi's lower body. Disregarding the blood and flesh splattering from Xiang Ao's body, 2 handsome boys, who looked only 13 or 14 years old, rushed over and cheered in unison, "Dragon meat. The meat of an ancient divine dragon. It tastes so good." They were the human incarnations of Gold Horn and Silver Horn, who had also stepped into the realm of first-year gold immortals. But, they had barely taken 3 steps when 2 young girls, who looked only 12 or 13 years old, grabbed their necks, pushed them to the ground and gave them a brutal beating. While beating the Gold Horn brothers, the 2 girls bellowed furiously, "You good for nothing. This meat is not fresh anymore. If you want to eat, you must find something fresh. If you want to eat, you must find something fresh." Ao Buzan, who was swinging his machete and slashing at Wu Qi, was so frightened that his hands went limp. Howling, he rushed out of the light screen. Gold Horn and Silver Horn exchanged a glance, then sprung to their feet and joined hands with the 2 girls to pounce on Xiang Ao. "Cut a leg for us, Ao Buzan." Gold Horn roared at the top of his lungs. "In any case, you can regrow a leg with just 3 to 5 years of hard cultivation, so hurry up and cut a leg for us." Dragon pythons of fire and ice were an ancient species, the natural enemy of the ancient divine dragons. As a mischievous man, Ao Buzan was filled with bitterness when he saw the 4 Gold Horn brothers. He angrily roared and cursed. Then, he rushed out of the light screen and disappeared without looking back. The Gold Horn brothers chased after him, determined to get a few pieces of meat from Ao Buzan, which were almost extinct now, so that they could feast on them to their heart's content. All of a sudden, a wild laughter was heard coming from the great hall next door. "Ha ha ha, I've finally concocted the 9 deaths and 9 lives white bone pill. It is a supreme-grade gold immortal pill that can prolong one's life by 36 periods." Patriarch Jiang Yun's laughter stopped abruptly. "Yen Bugui, you bastard. Leave one for me and let me study it carefully. Why did you take all 108 spirit pills? What are you going to do with them? You bastard. You bastard." A loud rumble rang out as the wall next door suddenly collapsed. As Patriarch Jiang Yun was busy chasing after Yen Bugui, he did not have the time to put away his blazing pill cauldron. The violent alchemy flame destroyed the cauldron, causing a large part of the wall to collapse. Wu Qi breathed a long sigh, then flipped over and kicked Lord Xianqing away, causing him to hang on the wall like a painting. "I have to think of a way to prolong the lives of Yen Bugui and the other scouting officers who are practicing the cultivation techniques of the human race." Calculating with his fingers, Wu Qi murmured under his breath, "Where can I find a primordial immortal who has committed the most heinous crimes to kill? There's no hurry. I can still cultivate for a little longer. It's only been 1,000 years, and it's only been half a year outside. Inside Wuqi's dark-Yin celestial tower, the sound of explosions, collapses, screams, and wails could be heard incessantly. It was full of vitality and the joy of life. To continue cultivating in such an environment for 1,000 years, life was just too wonderful. Chapter 8:12. Time flowed like water. Another half a month had passed in the outside world, and the people in Dark-Yin Celestial Tower had been cultivating hard for 500 months, or more than 40 years. As usual, Wuqi devoured the natural energy in the outside world, converted it into chaotic energy, refined it into the energy essence of an immortal cultivator through his fleshly body, and delivered it to his subordinates through the enlightenment technique. During these days, Wuqi's cultivation base remained at the level of 9th-tier primordial immortal, but his foundation was much more stable than before, and his energy essence and bloodline were more than 100 times stronger. He had spent most of his energy on the people around him. If not for the fact that he had sacrificed his own energy essence to help these people, even though the time in this place had been sped up by 2,000 times, and there was an endless amount of natural energy to help them cultivate, how could Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others improve so quickly? After more than 40 years, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others all had the cultivation base of peak-level gold immortals, and their Tao hearts had also bloomed as Wuqi preached to them day and night. This germination was the opportunity to enter the primordial Great Tao, the gateway for them to step into the Tao realm from an ant. As long as they carefully nurtured this germination with their blood and sweat, they would one day step into the Tao realm. Ao Buzan, Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, Silver Feather, Lord Xiansheng, his father Ao Guang, the Dragon King of the East Sea, Ao Qua, the Dragon King of Qianzhang Lake, Ao Quan, the former leader of the aquatic clans on Myriad Immortals planet, Little K, the phoenix raised by Princess Zhanglu, and Feng Tianling, the descendant of the fire phoenix whom Little K had seduced. These people were the most capable and closest demon cultivators under Wuqi's command, and all of them had the hope of stepping into the realm of primordial. What surprised Wuqi the most was that the rabbit demon Rabbit and monkey demon Yuan Qing of the underhand sect that he'd casually taken in all those years ago had actually awakened their ancient bloodlines, and their cultivations improved the fastest amongst the numerous demon cultivators of the underhand sect. Wuqi gave them special attention for a period of time, preaching various cultivation manuals of primeval demons every day, causing them to catch up to the footsteps of Ao Buzan and the others. Among the many demon cultivators around Wuqi, the one who gave him the biggest headache now was Catfish. Her cultivation base and realm were equal to that of Ao Buzan and others, and for some reason, her divine strength was able to suppress Lord Xiansheng to the point of suffocation. Among the demon cultivators around Wuqi, only Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing, the descendant of the mighty ape, could barely suppress her in terms of physical strength. But when Catfish Flood Dragon was the king of the mountain in the depths of Meng Mountains, she killed countless living beings every day, and spent all her time devouring them. As a result, she was entangled with evil karma and was surrounded by boundless evils. Her true form was just a deep-water black catfish, and she did not have any ancient bloodline. It was extremely difficult for her to transform into a human form, and coupled with the entanglement of evil karma, she still looked like a catfish until now. Through the Dharma eye of transmigration of the Buddhist League, which Wuqi had cultivated with the great light indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture, he could see that Catfish Flood Dragon was shrouded in a blood-red light and shrouded in black mist. Obviously, she had eaten too many things that she should not have eaten over the years. It was like a heavy shell wrapped around her, preventing the germination of a primordial immortal from sprouting. Not only did it delay her transformation into a human form, it also made it very difficult for her to break through to the primordial immortal realm in the future. For now, she could only do as Wuqi had planned, find a few primordial immortals who had committed the most heinous crimes and secretly kill them, then let Catfish Flood Dragon plunder a great deal of virtue of heaven and earth from them. With the virtue, she could wash away the evil karma around her, freeing her from these troubles. Apart from these demon cultivators, the senior immortals around Wuqi were Patriarch Jiang Yun, Patriarch Qing Wu, Patriarch Bai Xia, Patriarch Qing Xian, Patriarch Qing Shen, and Patriarch Qing Yi. They were the 6 old immortals from White Cloud Immortals sect and Tranquil Vimla sect. With the help of Wu Qi, their cultivation bases had reached the same level as Ao Buzan and the others. In addition to that, Lu Qingfeng and Lu Ziyuan, the two brothers, had been working hard in their cultivation base over the years. Together with Wu Qi's special help, they had also reached the point where they were just one step away from the realm of primordial immortal. There was also Supremacy 3 Flame, who was Wu Qi's friend in times of adversity. Over the years, he had been handling the affairs of underhand sect for Wu Qi. He stayed in Mount Picking Star, and basically never left the sect. All he did was carefully train and manage Wu Qi's disciples. Wu Qi was very grateful to him, so he spent a lot of time and effort on Supremacy 3 Flame and Xue Mei. Now, Supremacy 3 Flame had successfully attained the enlightenment of the realm of primordial immortal, and his technique of controlling fire with the divine flame of great tranquility was only inferior to the sovereign of myriad immortal alliance. The little girl, Xue Mei, was so smart that she had reached this critical level. With just a little push, she would be able to step into the realm of primordial immortal. As for the disciples of Luo clan whom Wu Qi took in on a whim, Luo Lu, Luo Hao, Luo Shui, Luo Ling, and Luo Yu were the most talented among them, especially the three sisters. If it were not for their outstanding talents, Wu Qi would not have taken them as his disciples. After over 1,000 years of enlightenment and constant explanation of the essence of the great Tao, they had all successfully stepped into the realm of primordial. However, it was too difficult for a gold immortal to break through the realm of primordial immortal. In addition to the huge demand for natural energy, it also required some kind of enlightenment and inspiration. For now, Wu Qi also needed to find a few primordial immortals who had committed heinous crimes and kill them, then use the virtue of heaven and earth to forcibly push these friends, family, and disciples into the realm of primordial. Only a freak like Wu Qi could do this. How could other primordial immortals treat their disciples, family, and friends in this way? For ordinary primordial immortals, a drop of blood essence and energy essence was more important than their lives. It was impossible for them to enlighten their disciples and forcibly improve their cultivation bases. It was a good thing that some primordial immortals who came from the evil path did not plunder the blood essence and energy essence of their disciples, but it was absolutely impossible for them to donate their own blood essence and energy essence to outsiders. Every drop of a primordial immortal's blood essence and energy essence was extremely precious, and related to their very foundation. Who else could do this except for a freak like Wu Qi, who could devour foreign objects without limit and transform them into blood essence and energy essence? Immortals were selfish, and only Wu Qi could be so generous. As for the essence of the great Tao, the essence of the great Tao that every primordial immortal comprehended was comprehended by them at the critical moment of life and death, after spending countless hours of hard work. If one wanted to hear a word or half of the true heavenly Tao from their mouths, it would depend on what one had to exchange for it. It was better for personal disciples. Generally speaking, those primordial immortals would give lectures for 3 days or 6 hours every period, depending on the generosity of the primordial immortals. As for how much a personal disciple could benefit from the lectures, it would depend on his own ability of comprehension. No primordial immortal would use his blood-draining celestial fiend clone to teach his friends, family, and disciples all kinds of heavenly Tao day and night like Wu Qi, forcing them to comprehend the endless mysteries in it. As for those in-name disciples and outer disciples, if one wanted to get a word or half of a primordial immortal's advice, it would depend on how many natural treasures they offered as tribute. If they offered a lot, 1 or 2 words of advice would be enough for them to comprehend for a few periods. If they offered too little, they might even be scolded. Are you purposely trying to embarrass me with such a small amount of gifts? It was because Wu Qi was willing to spend so much and cultivate the people around him at all costs that the grand occasion of today could come about. With a total of 29 people who had the potential to break through the realm of primordial, and thousands of subordinates whose cultivation bases had reached the realm of gold immortals, Wu Qi was now in a state of happiness and distress. I have to find a few primordial immortals who have committed the most heinous crimes and kill them. Otherwise, it will be difficult for all of you to break through the realm of primordial in a short time. Sitting cross-legged on a hassock, Wu Qi gritted his teeth as he looked at the 29 friends and relatives who had the potential to break through the realm of primordial. Everyone was staring at Wu Qi with their bright eyes, filled with passion, affection, and friendship. Their pure and warm feelings were like strong wine, lingering in the air between them. Even Ao Buzan, who was usually the most shameless fellow, now looked at Wu Qi with a hint of admiration and respect in his eyes. Everyone knew that if it were not for Wu Qi, they might not have had the opportunity today even after thousands of reincarnations, let alone Ao Buzan, who had been made into a storage ring and would never be able to make a name for himself. It was Wu Qi who had given them such an opportunity, and they finally had the chance to stand at the top of all living beings. Sitting next to Wu Qi was Princess Xianglu, who was clad in a black palace dress and had long hair like Wu Qi. With her head down, she was fiddling with 3 phoenix feathers that she had pulled out from little K.'s tail, and was inscribing primordial divine runes into the feathers. She was going to use little K.'s tail, Ao Buzan's dragon whiskers, the scales of gold horn and silver horn, and Rabbit Xiaobai's long hair to make a fun magical treasure. Princess Xianglu had successfully broken through the realm of primordial immortals without any stagnation. She carried the bloodline of the primordial heaven god and was the manifestation of the great Tao of heaven and earth. A breakthrough was a breakthrough, and there was not even a heavenly tribulation. She had dismantled the original Five Thunders immortal zither and was going to use it on this new magical treasure. It was a little embarrassing for a primordial immortal to use a zither that was only a heaven immortal item. Upon hearing Wu Qi's plan, Princess Xianglu lowered her head and sighed. We have to find a suitable target. The 7 primordial immortals you killed last time have been guarding the mortal world all year round, and they have accumulated a lot of virtues. They have avoided the punishment of the heavenly Tao with virtues, so it's no good to kill them. Where can we find someone like the sovereign who has committed a heinous crime to kill us? The group of people looked at each other with a distressed expression. Wu Qi had a strong army around him now, but he was still one step away from being reborn. If all these people could break through the realm of primordial, Wu Qi's power would undergo a tremendous change, and many things could be carried out slowly. Just one step away. Wu Qi gritted his teeth and murmured in a low voice, just one step away. As long as all of you become primordial immortals. When the 6 states unite, gather all those freaks together, and spend some time to raise them all to the level of gold immortals, the world will be lively. With a sigh, Wu Qi shook his head, a little vexed. Where could he find a primordial immortal who had committed a heinous crime? Just as the crowd was racking their brains for a solution, they moved at the same time and looked up with ferocious faces. About 100 million miles above them, outside the 2 palaces that Emperor Haozuan had given to Wu Qi, King Baishan was approaching cautiously under the cover of night with a large group of ferocious-looking generals and thousands of black-robed oracles. Judging from King Baishan's ferocious and violent expression, he should not be here to drink and chat with Wu Qi. Chapter 8:13. He. Wu Qi's sinister laughter rang out in the dimly lit hall. His eyes shone with a strange gleam. Under the gaze of his chaotic divine eyes, the thick fire of karma around the dozen or so cloaked men around King Baishan was so eye-catching that they looked like a dozen torches, and the crimson glow of the fire of karma was so tempting. The fire of karma was the condensation of too much karma, a flame ignited by all kinds of filthy thoughts in people's hearts. Buddhism called it the red lotus karma fire, and it was the filthiest and most powerful invisible flame in the world. Serious immortal and Buddhist cultivators would avoid this kind of fire of karma, as even the slightest touch of it would cause their golden bodies to fall into the cycle of samsara. The fire of karma around the men around King Baishan soared hundreds of feet high. Clearly, they were not immortal or Buddhist cultivators. Even fiend immortals and ghost immortals dared not touch this terrible flame, so they should be pure human beings. How many sins did they have to commit to accumulate so much karma and ignite such a blazing fire of karma? Wu Qi marveled. If he killed them, how many virtues of heaven and earth could he get? He had no idea how many sins they had committed, how many people they had killed, and how many laws of the heavenly Tao they had violated. But this was really a virtue that came knocking on his door, and it would be disrespectful to refuse it. Laughing loudly, Wu Qi opened his mouth and sprayed out a beam of green light, from which 360 miniature Kunwu swords flew out. These swords were only 1/3 the size of the original Kunwu swords, and they were the largest number that Wu Qi could produce now. The fact that he could produce 360 swords that were slightly smaller but fully functional would not affect Wu Qi's overall strength. If he used them to lay out the fiend-slaying sword formation, its power would be about twice that of a formation laid out by 108 Kunwu swords. After handing the Kunwu swords to 12 prudent men, including Patriarch Jiang Yun, Wu Qi ordered, apart from you, choose 348 prudent men who are proficient in formations and prepare to lay out the fiend-slaying sword formation. Since King Baishan is here, don't let him go. The people around him might be where your fortuitous encounters lie. The eyes of Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others brightened. They quickly took over the Kunwu swords handed over by Wu Qi and left the hall. Then, Wu Qi gave Ao Buzan and the other demon cultivators a look and said with a cold grin, "Come with me, let's see what King Baishan wants to do first." Frowning, Wu Qi murmured in surprise, "Didn't they say he was imprisoned by Emperor Haozuan in Deyu's imperial prison and will never come out? His title is going to be inherited by Deyu's royal family. Why did he come here to make trouble?" Princess Xianglu carefully put the 3 phoenix feathers in her hand into her sleeve. She yawned lazily and said lazily, "Who cares how he came out? Let's kill him first, then kill all the direct descendants of King Baishan's bloodline, and then find out who released him from the clan prison without permission." A 5-colored divine ray burst out of the top of Princess Xiangli's head, in which 3 shrines, each about 10 feet tall and inlaid with gold and jade, hovered. Over the past 1,000 years, with the help of Wu Qi, Princess Xianglu had formed the first golden body of the god of Scourge, and with the help of Wu Qi, she had also formed the golden body of the god of Plague and the golden body of the god of Thunder. Once the golden body of the god of Plague was activated, plagues would be everywhere within millions of miles, and all the living beings whose cultivation bases were lower than Princess Xianglu would not be able to escape. If the golden body of the god of Plague was used to cast a divine spell on one person, the terrible plague curse would be a headache even for those whose cultivation bases were several levels higher than Princess Xianglu. As for the golden body of the god of Thunder, there was nothing special about it. But once it was activated, the area within millions of miles would be turned into an absolute realm of thunder and lightning, with nothing but thunder and lightning. If she focused all her divine power to unleash the ancient void-shattering thunder, it would be a supreme divine ability that could shatter the primordial void. Even the Panga heaven-creating thunder, which the great Saint Panga used to create this world, was derived from the ancient void-shattering thunder, which showed how powerful this divine ability of Princess Xianglu was. In terms of physical strength, Princess Xianglu was far inferior to Wu Qi, and in terms of unpredictable and powerful divine abilities, Wu Qi was no match for Princess Xianglu. The two of them left Dark Yin Celestial Tower hand in hand, followed by Ao Buzan, Lord Xiansheng, and other demon cultivators who were impatient to study the sword formation. Huang Liang also came with a group of generals of the East Sea, who had been completely brainwashed and loyal to Wu Qi in the past 1,000 years. The cultivation techniques of the human race were the fastest to master. Over the past 1,000 years, the East Sea had accumulated tens of thousands of generals with the cultivation bases of the second Panga heaven. And now, hundreds of generals with the cultivation bases of the 8 and 9 stars of the second Panga heaven had followed them. All of them were armed to the teeth, using the supreme-grade armors and weapons that Wu Qi had personally crafted for them over the years, which were top-notch in both offense and defense. Wu Qi had not slept or rested for more than 1,000 years. He had not only helped them in their cultivation, but also infused them with a lot of blood essence and energy essence, crafted all kinds of weapons and armors for them, and helped Patriarch Jiang Yun concoct pills and draw talismans. If he did not have 18 blood-draining celestial fiends, Wu Qi would have died of exhaustion long ago. He had to take care of more than 1 million people. Even if he was only responsible for a small portion of the most elite people, the workload was still too much. But now, as he looked at his subordinates in bright armors and towering murderous auras behind him, Wu Qi was filled with a heroic spirit. He threw his head back and roared with laughter, then put his arm around Princess Zhongli's waist and strode out with them. With the help of Princess Zhongli's magical art, it took them only the span of 2 or 3 breaths of time to reach the surface of the natural energy ocean. On the roof of the tallest main hall, Wu Qi and his company hid their figures and watched quietly as King Baishan and his men carefully sneaked in from a distance. Under the night sky, King Baishan's army of more than 20,000 generals was divided into more than 2,000 squads, cautiously approaching the core of Wu Qi's palaces from all directions. Their movements were as smooth as flowing water, and in just a few leaps, they had closed the distance of dozens of miles. The two palaces given to Wu Qi by Emperor Haozuan covered an area of hundreds of miles, and they were given to him together with ordinary guards, maids, and a large number of eunuchs. Wu Qi was a master who was easy to serve, and he usually spent most of his time in seclusion. As a result, the servants never saw Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu. Now that it was late at night, the maids and eunuchs had gone to bed, and only the guards on night duty were still wandering around carelessly. After all, Wu Qi's foundation was still shallow, and he did not have many relatives or children, and there were no important things stored in those palaces. So, these guards were not under any pressure, and even if they were patrolling at night, it was just for show. Not to mention that there were no thieves in Liangzhu. Even if there were, they would not be able to steal anything of value, and they would not be able to hurt anyone important. But King Baishan's generals did not think so. They invaded Wu Qi's palaces like quicksilver, killing all the living things in their path. Whether it was the guards on duty, the maids and eunuchs who had gone to bed, or the tamed birds and beasts used for night patrols, these formidable generals killed them all. Not even a chicken or a dog was spared. Wu Qi pursed his lips. Do I have such a big grudge against him? As Wu Qi and his company possessed a profound cultivation base, they could see every single movement of those people in the dark night. Seeing a general with the cultivation base of the 7 stars realm of the second Pangu heaven crush a cricket that jumped out of the grass with 1 foot, Wu Qi could not help but complain bitterly. Not only did you not spare a chicken or a dog, but you even want to kill all the insects. How much do you hate yourself? The group of people were left speechless. They watched as a few intruders flew up the trees and strangled all the birds in the nests, regardless of their size. Even the eggs were crushed into a paste. Tu Xiaobai, who had the best temper among them, was so angry that she waved her little fists. The young girl that Tu Xiaobai had transformed into was just like her name, petite and adorable to the extreme. She was only as tall as an ordinary person's waist. Due to her rabbit nature, Tu Xiaobai was usually gentle and kind, and was the least willing to fight with others. But when she saw that these people did not even spare the birds' eggs, she could not help but say angrily, "Master, these people deserve to die 1,000 times for their crimes." Princess Xianglu raised her chin and said coldly, "They really deserve to die. Let's teach them a lesson first." Gently waving her hands in the air, Princess Xianglu unleashed her divine power soundlessly. She had already locked onto the 20,000 invaders with her divine soul. She did not attack these generals. Instead, she followed a mysterious guiding force and directly found these people's blood relatives in this life. There were more than 20,000 high-ranking military officers, and each of them had a huge family backing them. Some of them had thousands of people in their families. Grinning coldly, Princess Xianglu drew these people's energy into a gray net that ordinary people could not see. The golden body of the god of plagues hovering over her head gently blew out a puff of gray air, and all the relatives of these 20,000 generals were infected with all kinds of strange plagues and poisons at the same time. Watching Princess Xianglu do this, Wu Qi could not help but be amazed by her attainment in divine magic. This kind of meticulous means of controlling the life and death of others was something that even Wu Qi had not mastered yet. This kind of terrible power that could silently and invisibly destroy an entire family made Wu Qi a little more wary of those gods he might encounter in the future. King Baishan was accompanied by thousands of black-robed oracles, who were also divided into nearly 1,000 squads and followed silently behind the invaders. They kept throwing numerous bone talismans, spirit bones, banners, and formation discs in all directions, quickly laying out the 10 Ultimate Formation, which was specially used by the Directorate of Celestials to trap and kill powerful enemies, with Wu Qi's 2 palaces as the core. The 10 Ultimate Formation could sever heaven, earth, gods, immortals, Buddhas, fiends, ghosts, demons, spirits, and humans. It could fuse all the ruthless energies between heaven and earth and wipe out all life. As these oracles moved, a faint black mist rose from the ground. Wherever it passed, all the flowers, plants, and trees withered and decayed, and all the houses in the palaces collapsed and decayed. The place shrouded by the black mist turned into a lifeless, withered land. What kind of hatred do you have? Didn't I just kill 2 of your sons? Wu Qi frowned and sighed. Get into formation. The 300 gold immortals selected by Patriarch Jiang Yun had already come behind King Bai Shan and the others with Kunwu swords in hand. They formed a circle with a diameter of 1,000 miles, and as Wu Qi gave a soft cry, they unleashed their swords at the same time. Invisible sword beams shot into the void and slowly drew in the power of heaven and earth in the surroundings to form the fiend-slaying sword formation. A huge iron plate was quietly appearing in front of King Bai Shan, who was charging forward angrily. Chapter 8:14. Standing on the top of the palace, Wu Qi watched quietly as King Bai Shan's men slaughtered wantonly in his territory. Kill, kill, kill. These servants and guards are all the people who used to live in this palace, and if you kill them all, Wu Qi will bring more of his own men from the East Sea and plant them here. Even the original palaces were built in the style of Diyu, and Wu Qi thought they were a little too ugly. The dark mist stirred up by the 10 ultimate formation had destroyed all these palaces, and Wu Qi could rebuild a batch of palaces and pavilions according to his own will. As for the flowers and trees, it was not a big deal. With the infinite natural energy in Yuxiong Plain, he could easily restore them to their original appearance. Moreover, the replanted trees could also form a formation with the rebuilt palaces, and they would not be infiltrated as easily as they were today. After all, this was only a property Emperor Haozuan gave to his people, and the various facilities here were not enough to satisfy Wu Qi's discerning eyes. It was better to destroy them all, as he could rearrange everything. The newly built palaces and gardens would not be as free as they were today. Even if a 9th-tier primordial immortal dared to sneak in, he would have to pay with his life. With his hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi sighed softly and suddenly let out a long roar as he watched the 20,000 soldiers brought by King Bai Shan approach. As Wu Qi's roar echoed out, Ao Buzan, who was standing behind Wu Qi, let out a strange cry. Standing 20 feet tall, Ao Buzan swung his black machete and roared, "Who are you, thieves? How dare you come to my place in the middle of the night with evil intentions? Eat my spear." Ao Buzan leaped into the air and swung his machete at an invading general 2 or 3 miles away, who was clad in black armor and breaking the neck of the last night guard. "Eat my spear." The general instinctively grabbed a round shield from his back and placed it in front of him. The most lethal part of a spear was nothing more than stabbing and stabbing. With the round shield protecting the vital parts of his upper body, the general was confident that he could block Ao Buzan's fatal spear. With a cracking sound, Ao Buzan hacked the general, who had just stepped into the realm of Second Panga Heaven, into 2 halves. It came down from the top of his head and came out from the bottom of his crotch. Chi-Chi's entire body, along with his armor and shield, was cut into 2 pieces. His internal organs and blood splattered all over the ground. Ao Buzan trod on a watery cloud and soared into the sky complacently. He let out a strange laugh and said, "Idiot, Lao Tzu said 1 spear, so you should just block 1 spear." Behind Wu Qi, Yuan Qing, who had the bloodline of a mighty ape, transformed into a yellow-skinned young man about 10 feet tall. Though skinny, his bones were strong, and his eyes were bright. Seeing that Ao Buzan had succeeded, Yuan Qing let out a shrill cry and leaped into the air, waving a large golden stick that Wu Qi had specially crafted for him and spitting flames from time to time. "Eat my spear, you little rascal. I'll poke your gallbladder." Yuan Qing had been led astray by Ao Buzan. He had been completely led astray by Ao Buzan. The cudgel, as thick as a big bowl, whipped up a gust of wind and pierced toward the gallbladder of the leading black-armored warrior. Just as the warrior was about to block it with his saber, Yuan Qing suddenly changed his move. The heavy cudgel slammed heavily on the warrior's ribs with a swoosh, like a python turning over its body. Yuan Qing's stick was not heavy, but it was made by Wu Qi from a piece of heavy fire elemental metal that had been refined and tempered for countless years on a neutron star in outer heavenly realms. It was a neutron star material, so weight and the like were meaningless. Wu Qi had set up many formations on the stick to reduce its weight. Usually, when Yuan Qing swung the stick, it weighed only about 5,000 kilograms. But, when it hit a human, the formations on the stick dissipated immediately, and all the weight of the stick blasted out. With a crisp sound, the man's armor and half of his body disintegrated into the tiniest energy particles, which then turned into countless shining specks of light that shot out in all directions. Yuan Qing laughed strangely and swung his staff like a tornado, beating the other 8 or 9 heavily armored warriors into a sorry state. Their swords, spears, swords, halberds, and all sorts of other weapons were smashed into smithereens by Yuan Qing's heavy staff. In the blink of an eye, 8 or 9 burly men had been beaten until their bodies burst open and they died. Whether it was in terms of cultivation base, strength, speed, or technique, these men were far inferior to Yuan Qing. When Ao Buzan saw that Yuan Qing had killed so many people with ease, he snorted angrily and swung his blade at the dozen black-armored men who were leaping at him. As a peak-level gold immortal and a member of the primordial dragons, Ao Buzan's pure physical strength had reached the limit below the realm of primordial immortals. As he swung the blade, the void in front of it cracked open. The dozen black-armored men howled miserably as their weapons and armors were cut in half by Ao Buzan. When Yuan Qing saw that Ao Buzan had killed a few more men than him, he roared and swung his stick at the 20-odd black-armored men who were charging at him. A series of egg-cracking noises rang out as Yuan Qing smashed the 20-odd black-armored men like eggs, sending their bodies flying thousands of feet away in all directions. Frowning, Lord Xianqing stood next to Wu Qi, shaking his head and saying, "Useless chickens and stray dogs. Tisk, it's really." He gave Wu Qi a sideways glance and said with a teasing smile, "In terms of cultivation base, a peak-level gold immortal bullies a poor worm in the 1-star realm of the second Pangu heaven. In terms of equipment, a future primordial immortal artifact bullies an ordinary artifact. In terms of bloodline, the bloodline of an ancient divine beast bullies a mortal." Wu Qi stretched out a finger and wagged it casually, then said shamelessly, "You can't say it like that. I've admitted the first 2 points, I did bully them. But the last point is that human beings are formed from the bloodline of hundreds of divine beasts and birds in the world, and they also have half of the bloodline of the great Saint Pangu. Although their strength is not as good as Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing, but, well, human beings are more balanced, aren't they?" Lord Xianqing blinked his eyes and opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he could not utter a single word. Wu Qi was right. Human beings were indeed a race with balanced development, and they had their own advantages over any ancient bloodline. But how did one look at this advantage? In a battlefield, it depended on the strength of brute force. In this regard, human beings were indeed not as good as the bloodline of the dragons and the primordial divine apes. Amidst the sound of bones and flesh being broken, Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing killed hundreds of black-armored men in a frenzy. Of the more than 20,000 generals brought by King Baishan, there were only a dozen of them who had reached the peak of the 9 stars realm of the second Pangu heaven and could fight against Ao Buzan and Yuan Qing. Now, they were guarding King Baishan and had no intention of attacking. King Baishan stood on a hillside a few miles away, looking at them coldly. Wu Qi had asked Princess Zhanglu to dispel the mist that had concealed them. Looking at each other from a distance of several miles, Wu Qi suddenly laughed. He cupped his fist and said, "Your Highness, how have you been after 1,000 years?" Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, King Baishan could not help but laugh. 1,000 years? Do you think I'm a fool? 1,000 years? King Baishan suddenly sucked in a cold breath. He stared blankly at Wu Qi for a while, and then remembered that Wu Qi had obtained a supreme tower that could control the flow of time from the secret vault of the Directorate of Celestials. With Wu Qi's cultivation base having broken through the realm of Supreme Oracle, it was possible for him to accelerate time by thousands of times. He had been imprisoned in the imperial prison by Emperor Haozuan for more than half a year, and Wu Qi had spent 1,000 years here. Looking at the generals of the East Sea standing behind Wu Qi, King Baishan took a few steps back reflexively. Each and every one of them had the cultivation base of the late or even the peak of the second Panga heaven. Wu Qi looked at King Baishan and sneered. He waved his hand and gave a low cry. Lord Xianqing pulled out his silver dragon halberd and rushed out, while Catfish Flood Dragon waved the mountain-sized hammer Wu Qi had forged for her, while the rest of the demon cultivators ran out with their weapons in their hands. Especially Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, and Silver Feather. Their lower bodies remained human, but their upper bodies had returned to the form of dragon pythons. They opened their mouths and inhaled the enemies around them. Large groups of black-armored men howled miserably as they were sucked into their mouths and swallowed in the blink of an eye. Huang Liang gave a soft cry. Hundreds of generals of the East Sea under his lead drew their weapons and followed Huang Liang's lead, forming the East Sea wave-folding formation specially designed for them by Wu Qi. Like an endless tide, they rushed out. Bringing with them the terrible aura of a charging army, they charged into the army of King Baishan's subordinates like a tiger charging into a flock of sheep. Wherever they passed, blood and flesh flew in all directions, and broken limbs were thrown all over the ground. King Baishan watched coldly as a large number of his subordinates were killed, as if they were not the generals of the second Panga heaven, but pawns that could be discarded at will. There was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth, as if he could not wait for all his subordinates to be killed. Wu Qi could not help but be a little surprised. Even if King Baishan was one of the most authoritative princes in Diyu, how many troops could he have? How many generals of the second Panga heaven could he have to trample on? Especially in his current situation, when he had just escaped from the imperial prison, how many loyal generals were still willing to die for him? How could he just let the last batch of generals who might be loyal to him die like this? Just as Wu Qi was wondering, King Baishan raised his hand and waved. The dozen men around him, whose bodies were shrouded in hellfire like torches, chuckled in a deep voice. Their faces were hidden under their cloaks, and no one could see their faces clearly. They chanted a spell in a low voice, and a great plume of black smoke surged out of the 10-terminal formation, turning into countless pitch-black pythons and rushing towards the men in the battle. Wu Qi was furious. This was a spell for the sacrifice of flesh and blood. King Baishan did not expect these generals to pose much of a threat to him. His plan was to use them as sacrifices, so he did not care how many of them Wu Qi and others killed. Princess Zhang reacted quickly. She unleashed a great sheet of 5-colored divine light, which enveloped Ao Buzan and others at the same time. Wherever the flame went, the black fog and pythons dared not come close. Wu Qi shouted a few times, and Ao Buzan and others hurriedly retreated to Wu Qi's side. The black smoke enveloped more than 20,000 generals brought by King Baishan, who seemed to have lost their minds and just let the smoke engulf them. The sound of bones and flesh being chewed rang out incessantly, accompanied by a heart-trembling sound. A beam of black light descended from the sky, and in the next moment, a fiend god about a mile tall and made entirely of white bones appeared silently in front of Wu Qi. This was not the projection of Lei Meng, the fiend god worshipped by Wu Qi. Instead, under the infinite temptation of more than 20,000 gold immortal sacrifices, this fiend god had chosen to descend in his true form. The black cloaks of the dozen or so black-robed men around King Baishan burned at the same time, gradually revealing their figures. 2 low-grade Supreme Oracles and 13 peak-level Sun Oracles. Chapter 8:15. There were 2 low-level Supreme Oracles. Wu Qi saw a pattern of a black Supreme Tower embroidered on their sleeves, which indicated that they had just stepped into this realm. But, they were, after all, Supreme Oracles, who had the overall strength to fight against primordial immortals. They were existences that he had to deal with carefully. As for the 13 peak-level Sun Oracles, Wu Qi shook his head indifferently. A peak-level Sun Realm cultivator was merely a peak-level gold immortal, and Wu Qi could easily find any cultivator of this level around him now. He could easily crush them. But, the problem was the fiend god hovering in front of him. Hundreds of tattered black strips of cloth were wrapped around his body. As the night breeze blew past him, the strips of cloth wriggled like venomous snakes, letting out shrill ghost howls from time to time. His upper body was 70 to 80% similar to a human skeleton, except that he had a few more vertebrae and ribs, and 3 sharp black horns on his skull. However, the lower half of his body, which was below his pelvis, was a mass of thick black gas. Countless twisted human faces could be seen in the black gas. Sharp and shrill howls pierced through the clouds, making people's eardrums hurt. It was as if their souls were about to be sucked out of their bodies. The fiend god's cultivation base was extremely frightening, and the attribute of his power was extremely bizarre. Even with the all-encompassing records in the scroll of stealing, Wuqi could not tell what type of death energy this fiend god possessed. His cultivation base was clearly stronger than Wuqi's, and Wuqi could vaguely see the upper limit of his power, just like a man hovering in the sky could vaguely see the edge of the ocean. But, Wuqi reckoned that he was not his match for the time being. Only by trapping him with the fiend's slaying sword formation and gradually whittling away at his essence could he kill him. If Wuqi were to fight him with only his own cultivation base, it would be difficult for him to resist him. The 2 supreme oracles were easy to deal with, and Wuqi and Princess Xianglu would definitely give them a hard time if they joined forces. However, the skeleton would not show any mercy to Wuqi and his wife. This was the biggest problem. After pondering for a moment, Wuqi raised his right hand and waved it. The natural phenomena medallion flew up along with tens of thousands of beams of light. Large clouds of smoke spurted out and condensed into a small world above Wuqi, trapping the fiend god in it. Muffled explosions could be heard from time to time in the void as the fiend celestial struggled and roared in the small world. The natural phenomenon medallion could only trap him temporarily and could not destroy him directly. Lei Meng. Wuqi whispered to Princess Xianglu. Princess Xianglu nodded. She performed an incantation gesture with both hands and recited a few incantations in a low voice. A bolt of lightning came whistling down from the void, and Lei Meng's 100-mile-tall projection clone immediately appeared in front of Wuqi. Lei Meng patted his belly, looked curiously at Wuqi, and said with a smile, "Do you have any good offerings this time?" "Well, I'm very satisfied with what you have offered the last 2 times. Lei Meng glanced at Wuqi with the lightning in his eyes, then cried out in shock, "Little one, how did your strength grow so fast? You really surprised me. Of the 14,597 people who have worshipped me, your cultivation base has grown the fastest." Smiling, Wuqi pointed in King Baishan's direction and said, "Lei Meng, help me hold off King Baishan and those around him. When I'm done with the skeleton he summoned, I'll join hands with you to kill them. The bodies and souls of those 2 supreme oracles are yours, and I only want the virtues that will fall after I kill them." Lei Meng's eyes shone brightly as he fixed his eyes on King Baishan and those around him, whose faces were a little unsightly. After hesitating for a while, he muttered, "It's not fat enough. As you know, the souls of supreme oracles are stronger than those of mortals, but there's a limit to their strength. I've eaten a supreme oracle once, and his bone marrow was all dried up, and I couldn't even squeeze out a drop of blood from his body. So, it's not good for me." Wuqi held up 2 fingers and promised, "Help me hold them off, and I'll find 2 primordial immortals as my offerings." "Of course, you'll have to help me as well." Lei Meng stared at Wuqi in astonishment. There were so many oracles and powerful clans in Diyu, and there were some who dared to offer primordial immortals as offerings. But, they were all saint emperors who had swept through the world in ancient times. How many years had it been since Lei Meng heard such a bold statement? Offering primordial immortals as offerings? Saliva mixed with electric plasma dripped from the corner of Lei Meng's mouth as he nodded and said, "Just hold them off, right? Leave it to me." With a strange laugh, Lei Meng glanced at the small world Wuqi had trapped with the natural phenomena medallion, wanting to see who Wuqi was going to deal with. But, he shuddered and looked at King Baishan in horror. "Do you have to fight so desperately? I can't believe you've summoned Gue Yu's true form." "Hee, interesting, it looks like this time." Lei Meng muttered in a low voice, and then a dull thunderclap rang out in the sky. He stared at Wuqi and said, I'll give you some benefits this time. Just kill Guiyu, and leave everything outside to me. I'll give you 10 days. If you can kill Guiyu, you'll have to give me his ghost head. Ha ha ha. As Lei Meng laughed, a plume of sticky, pale purple electric plasma that looked like molten lava slowly poured down from an invisible hole in the sky and injected into his body. As more and more electric plasma was injected into his body became shorter and shorter, and eventually, he was about the same height as an ordinary man. But, he was surrounded by endless thunderclouds, and his whole body was immersed in a sea of electric plasma that was as warm as jade. A terrible pressure of thunder came from him, forcing Wu Qi and Princess Zhang to take a step back. Lei Meng's true form had come to Pangu continent from the world he came from. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang clearly sensed the rejection of the laws of the heavenly Tao to him. A powerful force of repulsion was applied to Lei Meng, causing his true form to flicker from time to time like a reflection in the water, as if he would be forcibly expelled from the world at any time. Wu Qi looked up at the sky. The dark mist of the 10 ultimate formation pervaded the void, and the fiend-slaying sword formation isolated the world from the outside world. This place had become a world of its own. Fortunately, Lei Meng did not suffer the full counterattack of the laws of the heavenly Tao. Otherwise, if he dared to come to Pangu world with his true form at any other time, he would have been killed by the power of the heavenly Tao, or smashed to pieces by Dayu's tremendous force. Even so, he was still being rejected by the endless power of the heavenly Tao. 10 days was the time Lei Meng gave Wu Qi, and it was also the longest time he could stay in this world. Even with Dark Yin Celestial Tower, Wu Qi could not resolve the rejection. No matter how Wu Qi sped up or decelerated, the flow of time was also a kind of power of the heavenly Tao, and Lei Meng still could not avoid the expulsion. 10 days is enough. Wu Qi glanced at King Baishan, whose face was unsightly, and suddenly laughed. I've only killed 2 of your sons. Do you have to hate me so much? If you didn't go after Lu Bang, why did you come after me? If you didn't have an affair with Lu Bang, why did you kill your sons? King Baishan's face darkened and he did not say a word. He just stared at Wu Qi and slowly pulled out his sword. An aura as hot as fire slowly poured out of King Baishan's body. Shockingly, he was also an expert of the 3rd Panga heaven. A mass of bright yellow energy shot out from the top of his head, in which a yellow dragon, several miles long, floated in the yellow cloud, its huge body bringing great pressure to those who looked at it. Lei Meng's face turned extremely serious. He showed 3 fingers to Wu Qi and said, "Little fella, 3 primordial immortals. Here are 3, and you must give me 3 offerings in the future." Wu Qi nodded and promised. "But you'll have to help me when the time comes," he said in a deep voice. Clapping his hands excitedly, Lei Meng laughed wildly and said, "That's a deal. You have a good reputation, I trust you." Amidst his laughter, he unleashed countless bolts of lightning that wrapped around King Baishan and his companions, including the 13 sun oracles. With his own power of thunder, Lei Meng had created a small world of thunder and lightning, ready to entangle King Baishan and the 2 supreme oracles around him with his own power. Hand in hand with Princess Zhang, Wu Qi also laughed and stepped into the small world manifested by the natural phenomena medallion. The vast black smoke rising from the formation of 10 extinctions was unleashed with a rumble, turning into countless evil spirits that charged toward Ao Buzan and the others with a murderous air. But, as soon as the formation of 10 extinctions moved, the fiend-slaying sword formation in the periphery moved as well. A vast amount of sword energy transformed into thunderbolts and flames that came whistling over from all directions, blocking the attack of the formation of 10 extinctions. Ao Buzan and the others looked at each other helplessly. Lord Xiancheng sat down helplessly on the roof of the palace and said, "I understand what Brother Wu Qi meant. If you don't step into the Tao realm, you will always be an ant. Now, we can only wait for the result." Thoughtlessly, Catfish Flood Dragon pulled out 2 corpses from her storage ring, whose heads were smashed to pieces by her hammers. She opened her mouth and began to gnaw on them. While chewing, she said vaguely, "Don't worry, Wu Qi is very cunning. Although the cultivation base of his true form has not improved much over the years, his clones, Ao Buzan and the others all had sinister smiles on their faces. Yes, the cultivation base of Wu Qi's 18 blood-draining celestial fiends was constantly improving along with the cultivation base of Wu Qi's true form. Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu stepped into the small world manifested by the natural phenomena medallion. It was a lifeless continent with nothing but a boundless black desert. A gloomy and dry wind blew across the desert, raising large amounts of sand and dust in the air. The collision of the tiny grains of sand could actually produce huge thunderbolts. Countless grains of sand and dust surged into each other, and the void was filled with water tank-sized thunderbolts that danced chaotically in the sky. It was a world of lightning that Wu Qi had created based on Lei Meng's hometown. The white-bone demon god, Guiyu, was covered in lightning. He was swinging a scythe with a long handle and slashing at the void. A few places had already been slashed by him, and the space was trembling under his tremendous strength. Fortunately, the natural phenomena medallion was an extraordinary artifact personally crafted by the sacred Emperor Xuanqiu, so it had a strong defense. Otherwise, with Guiyu's attack, this part of the void would have long been chopped to pieces by him. Seeing Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu step into the void hand in hand, Guiyu carried the scythe on his back and stared at Wu Qi with his eyes flashing with green ghost fire. I hate this place. It looks a little like the fantasy realm of Thunderstorm, the birthplace of the Thunder Fiends, the mortal enemies of our clan. Wu Qi smiled, nodded, and said, that's for the best. I'm here to kill you. Flicking his fingers, Wu Qi said, how many virtues can the heavenly Tao give me for killing a fiend god who invaded this world? Guiyu paused, then suddenly burst into wild laughter as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He laughed so hard that even his bones creaked, and all his teeth nearly flew out of his mouth. Chapter 8:16. After laughing wildly for a long time, Guiyu pointed at Wu Qi and said with a cold grin, you want to kill me for merit? Wu Qi nodded seriously. He stretched his neck and abruptly grew to about 100 feet tall. Purple golden dragon scales emerged all over his body, and a pair of 7-colored dragon horns slowly grew out of his forehead. Dragons were the gods of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. As Wu Qi transformed into a dragon man with the dragon kill, a dragon aura spread out in all directions. Countless thunderbolts shot out from the friction between the sand and dust in the air immediately began to spin according to Wu Qi's will, gradually turning into a whirlpool of thunderclouds with a diameter of 10,000 miles. A 5-colored divine ray burst out from the top of Princess Zhongli's head. The avatar of the god of thunder slowly raised both hands in the shrine, gathering all the thunderbolts in its palms. Gradually, the huge thunderbolt compressed into a fist-sized purple thunderball. This was the strongest attack of the ancient god of thunder, the void-shattering divine thunder, a supreme thunder magic that could even blow up the primordial chaos. With Princess Zhongli's current cultivation base, this divine thunder was enough to pose a great threat to enemies who were several times stronger than her. Guiyu shook his head desperately, his white teeth clattering and making a mocking noise. He pointed at Wu Qi and said with a smile, Dayu's secret palace's dragon kill. Years ago, I killed a man who was twice as strong as you and had also practiced the dragon kill. A genius who cultivates both fleshly body and magic is nothing in my eyes. My body is condensed from the pure yang ghost energy. Unless you are proficient in the art of subduing ghosts, what can you do to me? After commenting on Wu Qi, he gave Princess Zhonglu a sidelong glance, shook his head, and said with a sigh, no, no. It's true that thunder magic is the strongest offensive magic for immortal cultivators like you, but the Ghost Fiend clan and the Thunder Fiend clan have been fighting for countless generations, and I'm proficient in all kinds of thunder magic. At most, your thunder magic can attack my pure yang ghost body with 30% of its power. How can you hurt me? Wu Qi could not help but laugh inwardly. This Guiyu was an honest fiend god. Before the fight even began, he had already revealed all his trump cards. The absolute yang ghost body condensed from absolute yang ghost qi. In this world created by the great Saint Pangu, he had never heard of the existence of absolute yang ghost qi. It must be some kind of spiritual energy unique to the ghost lair's hometown. However, he had underestimated her and Princess Xianglu. This was unacceptable. A stream of chaotic energy rushed out from the top of Wu Qi's head, transforming into a dark-green celestial tower that was less than a foot in diameter, hovering high up in the sky. The flow of time in the small world inside the worldly phenomena tablet was accelerated by 2,000 times, and the range was limited to this small world. In the outside world, Lei Meng could hold on for 10 days under the banishment of the laws of the Great Path, so Wu Qi had 20,000 days to use. If he still could not deal with the ghost lair after more than 50 years, then he really could not do anything to him. The ghostly fire in Gue Yu's eyes flickered. He stretched out his hands and waved them gently. A tower of Babel that can control the flow of time. Amazing, you actually have such a rare treasure. Are you really going to keep me here? After asking Wu Qi, Gue Yu did not wait for Wu Qi's answer. Instead, he suddenly opened his mouth and sprayed at Wu Qi with all his might. A plume of dark mist with an indescribable stench of corpses sprayed toward Wu Qi's head. The mist flew so fast that before Wu Qi could dodge, he was already wrapped up in it. The purple-gold dragon scales with amazing defensive power turned dull in an instant, and Wu Qi felt a burning pain all over his body. A large number of dragon scales lost their vitality and turned a lifeless grayish-white color. Dozens of dragon scales on Wu Qi's chest turned into white dust and drifted away from his body. The 1-foot-wide flesh on his chest had its life force sucked away by the ghostly aura, and like the dragon scales, turned into dead white dust and drifted away. Wu Qi was so angry that he laughed. His scroll of stealing was all about plundering external objects to replenish his energy. How could this Gue Yu use ghostly aura to rob his life force? But, it was indeed very frightening. The dragon scales, which even Princess Zhongli's ancient void-shattering divine thunder could not break, were shattered by Gue Yu with just a puff of black smoke. What was the origin of this ghostly aura? With a cold snort, a glinting cloak suddenly appeared behind Wu Qi's back. He sped away in a beam of light and came in front of Gue Yu in a flash, his fists smashing toward Gue Yu's spine like shooting stars. Behind Wu Qi, Princess Xianglu let out a clear cry. The purple ball of thunder in her hand shot out silently and smashed toward Gue Yu's sternum before Wu Qi could. Gue Yu laughed strangely. Before Wu Qi's fist could get close to his body, his spine had turned into a clump of ghostly aura. The sticky, black ghostly aura transformed into dozens of ferocious bone claws, grabbing toward Wu Qi. As for the ancient void-shattering divine thunder that was shooting toward his chest, Gue Yu just waved the scythe on his back and casually slashed at the ball of thunder. Wu Qi, who was rushing toward Gue Yu, could not dodge in time, and the dozens of ghost claws had firmly gripped his body. The ghost claws formed from the pure yang ghost energy were extremely tough, and possessed a tremendous strength. Wu Qi was grabbed by the claws and struggled for several dozens of times, yet he just could not free himself. When Gue Yu saw that Wu Qi was trapped by his magic, he laughed even more complacently. The black scythe, which looked like it was made of bones, slashed heavily on the ball of thunder. In Gue Yu's surprised gaze, the ball flashed and disappeared, then suddenly appeared in front of his chest and exploded. All the thunderbolts within a radius of 10,000 miles were condensed into a ball of thunder, which also contained a trace of the law of thunder that Princess Zhonglu had comprehended. The plasma-like thunderbolts spread silently and enveloped Gue Yu's entire body. The purple-blue thunderbolts floated in the air like crystals, with Gue Yu's body embedded in the huge ball of thunder like a fly in amber. The high-temperature thunderbolts burned his body and soul. Gue Yu let out squeaky screams, and faint black smoke kept rising from his body. But, as he had boasted just now, he was proficient in the art of controlling and guarding against thunderbolts. Countless dense black talismans emerged on his pale bones, which reduced the damage caused by the thunderbolts to the minimum. The thunder ball unleashed by Princess Xianglu was the softest kind of the void-shattering thunder. Once it hit an enemy, it would stick to him like maggots on a tarsal bone, constantly erupting with soft thunderbolts that could completely wipe out the enemy's existence. But, facing Gue Yu, who was much stronger than Princess Xianglu, the thunder ball was obviously not enough to hurt him. Accompanied by the strange laughter, the lightning around Gueyu's body was gradually extinguished, and his pale bones were exposed one by one. Gueyu looked at Princess Zhanglu and said with a hideous smile, "I've told you, how can you hurt me with such a small trick? This supreme tower is a good treasure. Even if I can't control it, it will be a unique treasure when I bring it back. I'll kill you now, then go out and kill everyone outside." Raising the scythe high, Gueyu lowered his head, smiled at Wu Qi, and said, "How can your close-range fighting skills defeat me, the pure yang ghost body?" The scythe could no longer fall down. Gueyu stared at Wu Qi in a daze. Wu Qi, who was imprisoned by his ghost magic, was looking up at him and smiling. His enormous body, which was thickly covered in dragon scales, was slowly glowing with a light that looked like molten gold. In Gueyu's shocked eyes, as if he had seen a ghost, Wu Qi's body gradually transformed from a dragonman's body into a golden Buddha with 4 faces and 6 arms. When Wu Qi was completely transformed into a golden Buddha, Gueyu felt that even the little bit of brain juice left in him was a little useless. Panicked, he looked at Wu Qi and screamed, "Aren't you a human warrior? Even if you are a cultivator of both body and magic, you can at most. Even if you are a cultivator of both fleshly body and magic, you can at most practice some evil magic like the curses of the human oracles. How could you possibly practice the supreme divine ability of the Buddhist League?" Gueyu wanted to tell him. Everyone in the world knew that the cultivation methods of the human race were incompatible with the mental cultivation methods of Buddhism and Taoism. Wherever the Panga's sacred energy went, all the Buddhist power and immortal power would turn into running water. Even for a Buddha of Buddhism, as long as he practiced the body-strengthening cultivation method of the human race, as long as the Panga's sacred energy entered his body, his golden Buddha body would slowly melt, and all the Buddhist power would vanish. He would no longer have the great power to subdue demons and devils. But Wu Qi was a freak. When he approached Ghost Lair's body just now, he had clearly used the Dragon Kill, a divine ability that was secretly taught in Great Yu's secret palace. How could he transform into the avatar of the Buddha now? If Gueyu had known that Wu Qi possessed the divine power of Buddhism, he would not have let him get close to him. Even for ghosts and deities from outer realms, the divine power of Buddhism had a strong restraining effect on him. Most of the reputation of Buddhism for being the best at subduing demons and devils was forged by the white bones of various ghosts and deities from outer realms. Gueyu wanted to cry. He let out a strange cry and was about to throw Wu Qi away with dozens of ghost claws. Laughing strangely, Wu Qi opened his mouth and spat out 6 blood-red sword beams. 6 blood centipede swords whistled through the air and slashed at Gueyu's neck like dragonflies skimming the surface of the water. The inborn spiritual weapon was extremely sharp and murderous. 6 beams of sword light fell one after another. Even though Gueyu's body was condensed from the so-called absolute yang ghost qi, his neck was still cut off. A strange head flew high into the air. Gueyu howled furiously, "How dare you trick me, boy? Strange, how can you use the divine power of Buddhism?" With an angry and puzzled howl, Gueyu's body exploded, turning into a sticky cloud of ghost energy that wrapped around Wu Qi. Gueyu's hideous laughter came from the ghost energy. So what if you have the golden body of Buddhism? With your cultivation base, you are far inferior to. Gueyu's laughter was once again interrupted by Wu Qi's action. Wu Qi slapped his own head, and 18 blood-red relics and 18 white relics flew whistling up from the top of his head. 36 relics emitted 2 different kinds of light, one of evil and the other of righteousness, that illuminated the void. Laughing strangely, 18 blood-red shadows rushed out of the red light, stirring up a boundless sea of blood and wrapping Gueyu in it. Meanwhile, the bright light emitted by the 18 white relics sprinkled on the ghost energy like flames. Wherever they passed, the ghost energy trembled like boiling water and kept making ear-piercing hissing noises. Gueyu let out a shrill scream and quickly transformed into a long stream of black smoke, darting up into the sky. But the 18 blood-red shadows clung to him with the sea of blood, not allowing him to escape. After being polluted by the blood sea, the black gas, which was originally flying fast, became extremely slow. The ghost howled in pain, the nether blood sea of the 9 nether, how can such a filthy thing exist in this world? Wu Qi paid no attention to Guiyu. He chanted the name of Buddha in a deep voice, and the golden body of Buddha slowly expanded to tens of thousands of miles tall. Sitting cross-legged, Wu Qi locked his hands into a lotus incantation gesture and gripped the void with a radius of 100 miles, covering the black smoke transformed from Guiyu. Word by word, a Buddhist mantra came out of Wu Qi's mouth, forming a golden ocean that wrapped the void tightly. After an unknown period of time, a despairing howl came from Wu Qi's palm. Along with a deafening rumble, a black pearl wrapped in a sticky green liquid flew up into the sky, smashing straight into the spot between Wu Qi's eyebrows. Chapter 8:17. In just the space of a breath, Lei Meng and King Baishan had exchanged hundreds of blows. Lei Meng was focused on attacking, while King Baishan was focused on fleeing. The two of them tumbled around in the sky, leaving many afterimages in their wake. It looked very lively, but it was not very effective. Two supreme oracles standing next to King Baishan flicked their fingers. More than 30 thin and light bone talismans flew out of their fingertips and exploded into a sheet of black light that shielded the generals and oracles who were not strong enough. King Baishan gave a loud cry as a large amount of black liquid oozed out of his body and formed a black armor that looked as smooth as an insect's shell. The shape of the armor was very strange, with long, curved, oval plates everywhere, and many sharp spikes growing out of the joints. Lei Meng withdrew his 2 electric whips and held up a finger. I was very happy that this little fellow had sacrificed the flesh and blood of immortals, so I promised him that as long as he gave me enough offerings, I would be the ancestral god of his clan. I thought it would take him at least thousands of years to gather the offerings I needed. Who knew that he had sacrificed the flesh and souls of all the living beings on a whole planet? With a strange smile on his face, Lei Meng shook his head and said, tens of billions of living beings, not only human beings, but also demon cultivators and human cultivators, as well as countless insects, fishes, birds, and beasts. There are too many of them to count. There are so many powerful clans in Diyu, and even when they carry out a sneaky blood sacrifice, they only have to slaughter hundreds of thousands of living beings. How can they compare to this little fellow's generosity? After putting on the heavy armor, King Baishan looked like a walking longhorn, and there were even 2 long feelers growing out of his head. Holding a heavy single-edged axe in one hand, he leaped tens of miles into the air and swung the axes at the 2 huge lightning bolts overhead. The axes and the lightning bolts collided with each other. A blinding light enveloped the whole world, and a deafening rumble knocked the oracles and generals behind King Baishan flying backward. Countless electric arcs, each as thick as a thumb and tens of miles long, sprayed out of King Baishan's body. The terrible force of thunder bombarded his armor and scorched it. Layer by layer, the armor turned to ashes, but more black fluid gushed out of King Baishan's body, constantly condensing into new armor. Lei Meng. King Baishan stared at Lei Meng and growled, I've heard of your name. You are the most overbearing fiend god in the outer heavenly realms, the vanguard of the Thunder Fiend clan. Ha ha ha. Over the years, in order to seize the blood offerings on Pangu continent, you have contacted many powerful clans of Great Yu. But they couldn't satisfy your appetite. What did that kid Tan Lang use to move you? Lei Meng, who was chasing after King Baishan, was caught off guard and was firmly attached to the human skins. He of Meng of Shan of said, of Meng of Chi of Shan of Bai. The little fellow just wants me to hold you back. Hee, you don't have to work so hard, do you? After the 9 altars were set up, the generals and oracles who helped the 2 supreme oracles took off their clothes. They stood in front of the altar in a group of 3. They took out sacrificial knives forged from black volcanic rocks and methodically sliced their foreheads. As if they could not feel any pain, they completely peeled off their skin. Then, like a butcher dismembering an ox, they cut open their stomachs, took out their internal organs, and placed them neatly on the altars. King Baishan and the many oracles behind him felt their scalps go numb, and they felt their hair stand on end. Wu Qi had sacrificed all the living beings on an entire planet. No wonder he could summon a fierce god like Lei Meng in his true form. King Baishan had traded the lives of more than 20,000 loyal subordinates who were in the realm of the second Pangu heaven to summon the ghost lair. On top of that, the ghost lair had enjoyed generations of offerings from King Baishan's bloodline, and had a deep friendship with King Baishan. That was why he had reluctantly come in person. But what about Wu Qi? He had just called out softly, and Lei Meng had come to this world. A monstrous evil aura towered into the sky. Although Lei Meng had sealed off all the natural energy in this world, this evil curse did not require the use of natural energy. His body flickered rapidly as he struggled to resist the rejection of the laws of heavenly Tao in this world. But that did not stop him from wielding two huge electric currents in his hands and lashing at King Baishan and his men hundreds of miles away like two long whips. To Lei Meng, the electric currents were like his own limbs, and he could control them at will. The two whips condensed from electric currents had been compressed into a tangible form, ripping through the air and producing a dull rumble that tore the eardrums of the generals and Pekyang oracles around King Baishan, who were all peak level 9 stars second Panga heaven. Blood dripped down their earlobes. Lei Meng hovered in the middle of the void, tens of thousands of miles around him. This was his territory, a world of thunder and lightning he had built with his own enormous thunder power. Apart from the power of thunder, there was no other natural energy here, and this environment was the true face of the birthplace of the Thunder Clan. Two supreme oracles cut their left wrists, and green fluid flowed out of their veins. Then, they began to recite an incantation in a low voice. Suddenly, the 27 intact human skins let out a shrill howl as they stood up, transformed into green evil spirits, and swooped at Lei Meng. Lei Meng was so angry that he cried out, "How dare you run away!" While King Baishan and Lei Meng were fighting Lei Meng, the two supreme oracles, who had been trapped in this part of the world with him, had deftly set up 9 altars made of bones with the help of a dozen generals and oracles. These altars were built with human spines and leg bones as their bases, and human skulls as their main bodies. 3 lamps made of baby skulls floated on top of each altar, filled with phosphorescence extracted from years of decaying corpses. Evil green light shone out of the lamp's 7 orifices, illuminating everything within 100 miles with a pale green hue. King Baishan wanted to criticize Wu Qi's behavior with the harshest words, but his accusation was weak. He had done a lot of blood sacrifices, and when it came to violating the human emperor's ban, many of the things he had done were even more shameful than Wu Qi's. Unable to accuse Wu Qi of taking the moral high ground, King Baishan became more and more exasperated. He tried his best to hack at Lei Meng. King Baishan rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to speak, Lei Meng suddenly let out a long roar and thrust his halberd at his heart. "But for the sake of the flesh and souls of those 3 primordial immortals, I'll have to do my best," he cried out. But King Baishan was like a loach smeared with oil. No matter how Lei Meng tried to stab him, he just kept his head down and fled. Several times, Lei Meng almost turned him into a meat skewer, but each time, he missed by a hair's breadth. King Baishan threw his head back and gave a long roar, a dazzling bolt of lightning shooting out of his mouth. Lei Meng's force of thunder had already smashed into his body and was running amok in his internal organs. But King Baishan was one of the dozen or so most powerful kings of Diyu, and his cultivation base was extremely frightening. His internal organs had long been tempered to be as smooth and tough as purple crystals, so when the force of thunder ran amok in them, it only gave him a slight shock before he spat them out of his mouth. With a flicker of his body, Lei Meng appeared in front of King Baishan and thrust his halberd at his face again. King Baishan still did not fight Lei Meng. He just sneered and continued to flee with his movement technique. This was a world formed by Lei Meng's thunder magic. In this small world, Lei Meng possessed the power of a sovereign. He could appear anywhere at his will and attack the enemy by any means. With King Baishan's cultivation base, if he wanted to flee, not even 3 to 5 Lei Meng could stop him. After all, when one reached the realm of primordial, it was difficult to seriously injure a primordial expert, even if one had an overwhelming advantage in overall strength, unless they had more than 10 times the number of their opponents. King Baishan turned and fled without a care for his face. The halberd barely grazed his body, ripping half of his armor to pieces and exploding into countless sparks amidst the plasma. But, the halberd had only torn a small hole in his back, turning his skin and flesh into charcoal. The sky was filled with bolts of lightning, and there was nothing but thunder. The air was filled with electric charges that made one's skin prickle, while the rest of the natural energy had completely disappeared. Large numbers of electric arcs had formed a tens of thousands of meters wide electric curtain in the air, twisting and drifting in the air like ghosts. Countless electric curtains like this filled everyone's sight. This was a hell of thunder that could bring despair to anyone. The halberd came piercing through the air like a bolt of lightning. When it was still hundreds of feet away from King Baishan's chest, a terrible force of thunder was unleashed. A great plume of plasma shot out and burned a huge hole in the armor on his chest. King Baishan cursed angrily, then turned and left, giving up the idea of fighting Lei Meng to the death. All the living beings on an alien planet. King Baishan's eyes turned red. He lunged at Lei Meng and swung his 2 axes at his head. How dare this bastard defy the human emperor's decree? Clearly, the axes in King Baishan's hand were not as powerful as the halberd. Lei Meng thrust the halberd forward casually and collided with the axes, shattering them in an instant. King Baishan grunted as tiny bolts of lightning exploded on his finger. The skin on one of his fingers was scorched, and drops of blood oozed out from under the skin and kept dripping down. When the 2 axes were still hundreds of feet away from Lei Meng's head, they suddenly exploded. In the next moment, a strange-shaped trident appeared in Lei Meng's hand, a twisted trident made of black thunderbolts that had condensed into a crystal-like material. Vaguely, one could see the spine of an unknown creature, hundreds of joints long, embedded in the handle. Each spine was densely covered with countless runes that shone with a dazzling light. Lei Meng's world had rejected all other natural energy, and only the power of thunder existed. But for an expert like King Baishan, who practiced the human body tempering technique of Hongmeng Panga Heaven, his need for natural energy was almost nil. With his formidable physical strength, he could fight any strong enemy, including the 2 bolts of lightning above him. Chapter 8:18. Just as the last wisp of his consciousness was about to be obliterated, he let out a deafening howl. He cracked the top of his head, and a black ghost core wrapped in a large amount of green mucus shot up into the sky. It was his natal core, and he was going to fight Wu Qi to the death. A ferocious and ugly ghost face flashed in the ghost core, and it suddenly expanded to about a mile in circumference. The natal ghost energy he had collected for countless years was about to explode. Wu Qi gave a cold snort and waved both hands. 6 blood-red sword beams shot whistling out of his palms, and the blood centipede swords hacked at his neck, chopping off his huge head with 3 sharp horns. He grabbed Guo Yu's body and swallowed it in one gulp. While laughing strangely, 18 blood-colored fiends rushed into Guo Yu's head and devoured his soul in just a few bites. His soul brand let out a shrill howl as he roared at the top of his lungs, "If you dare to kill me, the Ghost Fiend clan." Wu Qi grabbed Guo Yu's soul seal and threw it to Catfish. "Eat him or do something to him," he said with a smile. "Just kill him." Wu Qi casually pointed a finger at the ghost core and cried out in a low voice, "This life is over. I'll send you to transmigration and let you be a new man in your next life." In the world conjured by the natural phenomena medallion, Wu Qi sat cross-legged in the shape of a Buddha, his huge palms locked into a lotus incantation that firmly suppressed Ghost Fiend. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break out. The great light indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture cultivated by the Lord Buddha of the Buddhist League was very powerful. As soon as Wu Qi exercised the transmigration technique, a miniature 6 paths of reincarnation was formed in the lotus incantation. Every time the 6 beams of black and white light spun, a layer of the pure yang ghost energy around Ghost Fiend would be stripped away, and then swallowed by Wu Qi with the myriad harmonization grand magic. The ghost lair roared and struggled several times, waving its scythe to cut Wu Qi's palm. But Princess Zhanglu was standing on one of Wu Qi's fingers, watching the ghost lair. Every time the ghost lair launched an attack with all his might, the god of Scourge's golden body above Princess Zhongli's head would immediately emit a grey divine power that shone on the ghost lair. The ghost lair was instantly struck with bad luck and almost had his head chopped off several times. High up in the sky, the terrifying pressure of the thunder tribulation gradually converged here. Catfish flood dragon's primordial thunder tribulation had arrived. A vast expanse of purple clouds came rolling in from all directions. The yellow and black gas turned into a heavy downpour and fell whistling down, while the virtues of the heavenly Tao turned into torrents of bright light visible to the naked eyes and kept falling. 20% of them fused into the bodies of Wu Qi and the 18 blood-draining celestial fiends, 10% went to Princess Xianglu, and the remaining 70% went to Catfish. Suppressed in Wu Qi's palm, the ghost lair cried out in despair and shock, "How is this possible? You are a human, but you can practice the Zen magic of the Buddhist League, and you can even devour my natal ghost energy. What kind of monster are you? You. A fragrant aroma filled the air. Catfish's huge body was riddled with countless large bloody wounds, from which black blood sprayed out like spring water. Chunks of fish and flesh fell off from her body. When they fell to the ground, they turned into filthy blood with a foul smell, while a very faint fragrance of dragon saliva slowly spread out from the depths of her body. Wu Qi sat cross-legged in midair, with golden lotuses spraying out of his mouth from time to time. The mantras of the Buddhist League he was reciting had turned into huge golden runes that wheeled in the air, emitting a vast amount of bright light that formed into golden torrents that danced back and forth in the air. Every time the 6 black and white beams of light spun in Wu Qi's palm, the ghost lair would be reincarnated in the miniature 6 paths of reincarnation. Emotions of joy, anger, sorrow, joy, wealth, and humbleness, all kinds of chaotic scenes of the mortal world kept bombarding into his divine soul, turning his mind gray and no longer as smooth and clear as before. Wu Qi's eyes burst with golden lotus flames, which transformed into dozens of golden chains that locked the ghost core tightly. The ghost core, which was about to explode, suddenly froze. Then, Wu Qi clasped his palms together and slapped them hard on the ghost core. 18 blood-colored fiend shadows rushed into the ghost lair's body and began to devour the most deadly ghost energy in him. Lei Meng was trying his best to hunt down King Baishan, but he was caught by the vicious restrictive spells cast by the 2 supreme oracles around King Baishan. But, the battle between Wu Qi and the ghost lair had reached a critical juncture, and the ghost lair was desperate. Gradually, Wu Qi's palm incantation changed from the lotus seal to the reincarnation seal. Once the seal was completed, the 6 paths of reincarnation in Wu Qi's palm would truly take shape. At that time, despite the ghost lair's supreme magic power, he would be thrown into the transmigration and lose all his mind. Even though he had supreme magic power, with his mind destroyed, he could do nothing but let Wu Qi do whatever he wanted, unable to fight back. Wu Qi burped, stroked his belly, and said with a wry smile, "I'm stuffed. I'm so full." This guy's cultivation base is at the peak of the 8th tier primordial immortal realm. What a pity, why is he a ghost? Why did he run into us? When they saw Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu step out of the void, Buzan and the others hurried over to them. Wu Qi looked up at the thundercloud hovering over them, about 1,000 feet in circumference, then nodded and said with a smile, "Lei Meng is really awesome. I've given him so many benefits and promised him so much. Catfish, catfish." Smiling complacently, Princess Xianglu came up to Wu Qi's huge face and gave him a gentle kiss. Wu Qi possessed the supreme divine ability of the Buddhist League, and Princess Xianglu was proficient in all the ancient techniques of controlling ghosts. When the couple worked together, the ghost lair, who was a ghost, would naturally suffer a tragic fate. If it were Lei Meng, Wu Qi's divine ability of the Buddhist League would not be a deterrent to him. With his cultivation base, it was impossible for Wu Qi to defeat him. Before Ghost Lair could finish his threatening words, Catfish grabbed his soul mark and threw it into her mouth, chewed it twice, and swallowed it. Suddenly, a great mass of black flame as thick as ink surged out from under her feet and spread rapidly in all directions. Seeing that Catfish was about to raise a flood, Lord Xianqing hurriedly reached out a hand and held the water wave within 100 miles of her. Ghost Lair's cultivation base was at least 100 times stronger than Wu Qi's, but the divine ability of the Buddhist League happened to restrain him, weakening his cultivation base by 100 times. On top of that, Wu Qi had the help of 18 blood-draining celestial fiends. The extremely filthy dark nether blood sea was attached to Ghost Lair's body, which was the filthiest thing in the world that even Ghost Lair could not withstand. His ghost body was contaminated by the blood sea, and he could only use less than half of his cultivation base. Princess Xianglu smiled softly as she flew up into the sky. The three avatars of the ancient gods behind her expanded to a height of 100,000 feet, sprinkling down a dazzling rain of divine power. Her hands rapidly formed hand seals, and all sorts of divine characters in the primordial divine characters, such as imprison, suppress, purify, expiate, and other similar divine characters, fell like raindrops, continuously branding themselves on the pitch-black ghost core. The ferocious ghost face inside the ghost core twisted and struggled wildly, but in the face of the divine runes Princess Xianglu had unleashed with all her might, its expression gradually became gentle and docile, and the ferocious face gradually transformed into the face of a rather handsome man. In comparison, the virtues obtained by 10 sovereigns were not as much as what Catfish had obtained today. What made Ghost Lair even more desperate was that Wu Qi's 18 blood-draining celestial fiends had stepped into the realm of primordial, and what they lacked was just a little bit of magic power and cultivation base. But now, Guiyu was possessed by the blood-draining celestial fiend. His cultivation base was sucked away like a tide, while the blood-draining celestial fiend's cultivation base had advanced by leaps and bounds, and was now almost on the same level as Wu Qi. Wu Qi even felt that he had only taken a few breaths, and Ghost Lair had been suppressed by him for more than 40 years. At the same time, a vast pressure gradually poured out of the golden light. With the power of virtue, Catfish had successfully stepped through the threshold. This was equivalent to 19 primordial immortals joining hands to beat him. On top of that, it was the joint attack of the Righteous Buddhist League and the Blood Sea Fiend League, which suppressed Ghost Lair so much that he wanted to die in Wu Qi's palm. Suddenly, Catfish Flood Dragon's body expanded to about 1,000 feet tall, and a pitch-black, sticky, and stinking fire of karma sprayed out from all over her body. The yellow and black energies of the heavenly virtue kept fusing into her body, and the fire of karma gradually dimmed. About a quarter of an hour later, the fire of karma on her body had vanished completely, and instead, a ring of golden light of virtue slowly emerged behind her head. Ghost Lair was a celestial fiend who had invaded this world, and was the target of the heavenly Tao's attention. He had been worshipped by King Baishan's clan for generations, and had sacrificed countless blood sacrifices to him every year. He had devoured the flesh, blood, and souls of countless mortals, so his sin of killing was 1,000,000 times heavier than Catfish's. It was true that Wu Qi had gained a great amount of virtue by draining Ghost Lair's cultivation base, but when Catfish devoured Ghost Lair's soul and completely destroyed him, the virtue was even more boundless. Ghost Lair threw his head back and howled in despair. He unleashed a monstrous ghost aura, trying to attack Wu Qi with all the vicious restrictive magic of the Ghost Clan. But, as the golden light of the Buddha illuminated the sky, and Wu Qi's 18 white natal relics hovered over his head, all the restrictive magic that appeared were immediately turned into black smoke and dissipated by the light of the Buddha and the relic. The divine abilities of the Buddhist League were the nemesis of all evil, fiend, and demon cultivation techniques. It was an innate restraint, and Ghost Lair could not think of any other way. Ao Buzan and the others were still waiting in the palace. Wu Qi counted with his fingers and found that 8 days had passed in the outside world, and Lei Meng would be expelled from this world in 2 days. In order to refine Ghost Lair, he had stayed in the Natural Phenomena Medallion for 1,006 days. More than 40 years had passed in the blink of an eye, but to him and Princess Xianglu, it was only a brief moment. As the power of virtue kept falling, Catfish's body was gradually enveloped by a strong golden light, and then a small figure gradually took shape in the golden light. In just a few breaths of time, Ghost Lair's head was sucked dry, leaving only a soul brand floating feebly in the empty skull. Wu Qi grabbed the soul brand with one hand, then transformed back into his human form, put his arm around Princess Zhongli's waist, and strode out of the world created by the Natural Phenomena Medallion. 2 blood-draining celestial fiends carried Ghost Lair's huge head, which was about 1,000 feet in diameter, and followed closely behind Wu Qi. A stream of Buddhist Zen power smashed into the ghost core, and the face suddenly burst into a great sheet of golden light, then disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi gave a long laugh and swallowed the core, which contained 90% of Ghost Lair's power. The myriad harmonization grand magic was running at full speed, while a vast amount of chaotic energy rushed out and gradually melted the ghost core, which contained a great amount of power. Catfish Flood Dragon, with her big catfish head, strode up to Wu Qi, tilted her head and spat out a mouthful of saliva as she asked, "Why did you call me?" Chapter 8:19. The primordial thunder tribulation was the scariest of all the thunder tribulations in the universe. There was once an unlucky fellow who had worked hard to break through from the peak level of gold immortal to the primordial realm, but because he did not have a good treasure to deal with the thunder tribulation, he was struck by it. Not only did he die, but his planet and all his disciples were also smashed to pieces. Ever since she was young, Catfish Flood Dragon loved to eat flesh and blood, and countless mountain spirits and water demons in Meng Mountains had been killed by her. Occasionally, she would open her mouth wide and swallow some cultivators who passed by, never fooling around. Therefore, the evil karma around her was extremely heavy, and even the legendary fire of karma was attached to her. If Wu Qi had not drawn in the virtues of the heavenly Tao to cleanse her foundation and eliminate her evil karma, it would have been impossible for her to step into the realm of primordial in this lifetime. Even with the virtues of the heavenly Tao cleansing her foundation, and a golden halo of virtue emerging behind her head, she had turned from a fiend who had committed countless sins into a virtuous cultivator. Her evil karma in the past was too much, so the power of the primordial thunder tribulation was not reduced at all. Clearly, it was the most terrible primordial thunder tribulation, the yin and yang cycle clear thunder. There was only one strike of this primordial thunder tribulation, but its power was equivalent to the full force strike of a 6th-tier primordial expert. If she could survive it, she would step into the realm of primordial, and if she could not, her soul would be destroyed. Fortunately, Wu Qi was here. When he was still in the realm of Jin Dan, he could steal the power of the thunder tribulation to temper his fleshly body and soul. Now that he had stepped into the realm of primordial, and with the myriad harmonization grand magic, a heaven-defying divine ability, as soon as the primordial thunder tribulation gathered in the sky, a turbid aura sprayed out from the top of Wu Qi's head. The 9 souls of Taotais formed the 9 palaces formation, opening their mouths and sucking at the purple-red tribulation clouds that kept gathering in the sky. Strands of tribulation energy, each as thick as a water tank, were swallowed by the souls of Taotais, and then channeled directly into Wu Qi's body. This thunder tribulation was the purest and most powerful force in the world, and contained an infinite life force amidst its extreme destructive power. This was the principle of the yin and yang cycle. If he could get a small amount of it to temper his body, it would be an opportunity that even top primordial immortals dreamed of. It was a pity that such a thunder tribulation would only appear when the evilest gold immortals were breaking through the realm of primordial immortals. Even a first-tier primordial immortal like Amitabha would not dare to absorb the power of yin and yang lightning to temper his body when others were transcending their tribulations. However, Wu Qi was different. Before the thunder tribulation had even formed, he had already begun to steal the power of the thunder tribulation. No matter how fast the power of the thunder tribulation gathered, it could not compare to the efficiency of Wu Qi stealing the power of the thunder tribulation. Boundless purplish-red tribulation clouds emerged from the void, but they were unable to take shape. At most, they could only maintain a small area with a radius of 1,000 feet. Wu Qi absorbed the power of the thunder tribulation to his heart's content. His chaotic energy carried the power of the thunder tribulation and circulated it rapidly through his meridians. Wu Qi's internal organs, muscles, and bones were rapidly disintegrating under the extreme destructive power of the thunder tribulation, but in the blink of an eye, they were restored to their original state amidst the endless life force that sprouted after the destruction. The components of his body were changing rapidly between life and death. Like a blacksmith forging iron, Wu Qi's body was tempered thousands of times in a flash, making his fleshly body much stronger than before. For a day and a night, Catfish's body was rapidly transforming, and the primordial thunder tribulation in the sky could not take shape. 24 hours later, the purple tribulation clouds finally exhausted their last bit of power, and were all absorbed into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi threw his head back and gave a loud laugh, then thrust a palm backward and sent a thread of the thunder tribulation's power into Catfish's body. "All right, "Catfish, if you don't transform now, King Baishan will have nothing to eat." A strange, hoarse, high-pitched, and ravenous roar rang out from the purplish-golden light that enveloped Catfish's body. Ao Buzan and the others were the first to be knocked flying away by the roar. The purplish-golden light faded away, and with the help of the last thread of Thunder Tribulation's power, Catfish, who had successfully transformed from a catfish into a true dragon, strode out of the light. Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu were sizing up Catfish Flood Dragon. Curiously, Princess Xianglu even stroked Catfish Flood Dragon's head. Standing about 4 feet tall, she looked like a teenage girl of 11 or 12 years old. Her chubby face was a little dark, which was obviously caused by the natural dark skin of a catfish. However, her facial features were very beautiful. Her slender body was clad in a short armor made from the dragon's skin that had fallen off during her transformation. Her arms and legs were exposed, making her look like a stunted little doll. Her slender arms and legs looked as if they would break into pieces at any moment if a gust of wind blew past. Although she was so tiny, she was dragging a huge hammer crafted by Wu Qi for her with both hands. The handle of the hammer was 36 feet long, as thick as a human head, and the hammer head was a square iron ingot, 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet thick. There was no decoration on the black hammer head, just a piece of dark nether silver iron essence that Wu Qi took out from a neutron star in outer space. Just like Yuan Qing's big stick, the hammer was engraved with countless runes to reduce the weight of the hammer to about 108,000 kilograms. However, once it hit an enemy, the runes that reduced the weight of the hammer would collapse and the runes that increased the weight of the hammer would condense and take shape. The hammer would then be as heavy as a star in the void. With such a heavy hammer and Catfish's immense strength, the damage it could inflict was really frightening. In any case, even with Wu Qi's current cultivation base and strong fleshly body, he did not want to take the hammer head-on. That showed how powerful the hammer was. Off to the side, Ao Buzan laughed strangely and said, "Such a tiny girl. She's not even enough to fill the gaps between my teeth." Ha ha ha. Catfish rolled her eyes when she heard Ao Buzan say that, and was about to give Ao Buzan a blow with the hammer. Hastily, Wu Qi grabbed her by the neck and threw her into the thundercloud that Lei Meng had transformed into. "Cut the crap. Ao Buzan, you guard the outside and break the 10 ultimates formation for me. Zi Xian, let's go in. It's time to see off that old fool King Baishan." Catfish cried out as she was thrown into the thundercloud by Wu Qi. Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu also strode into it. Amidst the boundless thunder and lightning, Lei Meng was beaten into a sorry state by King Baishan and 2 supreme oracles. No one knew where King Baishan had produced a pair of short 8-edged purple-golden hammers. With every swing of the hammers, boundless cold air would rush out of them as he chased after Lei Meng and smashed him. Standing in front of 9 altars made of white bones, the 2 supreme oracles were waving their hands and chanting spells. 27 fiend shadows transformed from human skins were lying on Lei Meng's body, roaring and howling. These fiend shadows did not have a normal state. They rolled and crawled on Lei Meng's body like liquid, tearing at him from time to time. Each time they did so, they would produce a great deal of lightning. Clearly, Lei Meng was dragged down by these fiend shadows. His speed was getting slower and slower, and his energy was getting weaker and weaker. Occasionally, when he tried to stab King Baishan with the trident condensed from thunderbolts, he would miss the target because of these fiend shadows. He wanted to summon the power of thunder around him and turn it into an electric whip to kill King Baishan. But, under the interference of the 2 supreme oracle spells, he seemed to have a problem controlling his own power. Plasma kept spurting out of his body, and his power was being sucked away by the fiend shadows. The Blood Soul Fiend Curse. Princess Xianglu could not help but exclaim when she saw the fiend shadows attached to Lei Meng's body. They are really cruel to use 27 experts like that to refine a curse. They must have planned to use it against us. Wu Qi acted quickly. With a casual point of his finger, 6 beams of blood-red light shot out. The blood centipede sword let out a shrill whistle as it flew toward the 2 supreme oracles who were waving their hands and controlling the curse. Princess Xianglu also clapped her hands. The silver lotus, which had completely transformed into a 5-colored lotus flower, spun out, turned into a plume of mist, and flew over Lei Meng's head, unleashing beams of colorful light to protect him. As soon as the colorful light touched the shadows, they let out shrill and unpleasant shrieks and tried desperately to get into Lei Meng's body. The two supreme oracles let out shrill shrieks as black smoke rose from their bodies. Dozens of grimacing fiend shadows wielding all kinds of strange weapons rushed toward the blood centipede sword. These fiend shadows existed between existence and non-existence. They looked solid, but at the same time, they looked like illusions composed of light and shadow. The blood centipede sword swept across their bodies, but failed to hurt them. Wu Qi was taken aback. These fiend shadows did not seem to be easy to deal with. While Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu were fighting the two supreme oracles, Catfish was already charging excitedly at King Baishan with the big hammer on her shoulder. Brother Wu Qi told me that I can eat you after I smash you to death. Don't run. Eat my hammer 1,000 times. It was not a lie, but 1,000 hammers smashed down on King Baishan like a storm. King Baishan, who was chasing after Lei Meng, was caught off guard. He could only swing his short 8-edged hammers to block the fiend shadows that came crashing down on him. He hurriedly raised his head to see what was ambushing him. When he saw Catfish's frighteningly huge hammer, King Baishan could not help but cry out involuntarily, "What the hell is this?" A loud rumble rang out as the two short 8-edged hammers were twisted into scrap iron, sending out a shower of sparks. In that instant, Catfish's hammer burst forth with a terrible gravitational force equal to that of a giant star. King Baishan's hammer was a rare divine weapon, but it was still dwarfed by the domineering weapon crafted by Wu Qi. Catfish Flood Dragon roared with laughter as she wielded the hammer and smashed it again and again. King Baishan had no time to dodge. Plumes of purple mist burst out of his body as he resisted Catfish's hammers with his fleshly body. During the first 300 strikes, sparks burst out of King Baishan's head, but he did not budge an inch. After another 300 strikes, flames burst out of King Baishan's 7 orifices as he continued to punch Catfish's hammers with his fists. After another 300 strikes, King Baishan coughed up a mouthful of blood, and then another mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of internal organs. When the last 100 strikes came whistling down, King Baishan could no longer withstand the terrible force, and his head exploded. Catfish burst out laughing. She grabbed King Baishan's headless body, opened her little mouth, and swallowed him in one gulp. A few crunching sounds rang out, and King Baishan, one of the kings of Deyu's imperial council, was swallowed by Catfish. Chapter 820. The mighty King Baishan was beaten to death by Catfish. Lei Meng, who had been chased by King Baishan for a long time, suddenly burst into a ferocious laugh. "This fellow has been chasing me for a long time. He has finally forgotten that this is my territory." Just now, Catfish had killed King Baishan with 1,000 hammers, not only because her hammers were too heavy and fast, but also because of Lei Meng's interference. Princess Xianglu had helped him control the curse of the fiend's shadow with a spell, and Lei Meng immediately recovered some of his strength. Immediately, he mustered the lightning in the surroundings and turned it into an invisible cage that locked King Baishan's body. Only then did King Baishan stand still and withstand the 1,000 hammers. Although King Baishan's fleshly body had been tempered to such a degree, he still could not withstand Catfish's continuous attacks. His head was smashed to pieces, and even his fleshly body was swallowed by Catfish. It was a miserable death. She patted her belly contentedly, then glared at the two supreme oracles, who were waving their hands and fighting with Wu Qi, and said angrily, "You are not good guys either." She gave a strange howl as she teleported 100 miles away with her hammers and smashed them down at one of the supreme oracles. The oracle gave a cold snort. An altar made of white bones suddenly flew up from beside him, and a great sheet of green light burst out of the lamp made of baby skulls, shining right on Catfish's body. Her skin, which was hit by the green light, bubbled and festered, while an invisible poison rushed madly into her body. Fortunately, her fleshly body was extremely strong, and her magic power and divine abilities were not to be underestimated. As soon as the poison entered her body, a great black wave immediately sprayed out of her festered skin. Accompanied by a deafening rumble, the waves turned into countless water arrows and shot toward the oracle. The poison in his body also poured out along with the waves. The water arrows carried with them a fishy smell. The poison swept through the void, and even the void was corroded by the poison, becoming extremely fragile. Dozens of small holes appeared in the void when the waves hit it. The two oracles screamed and stood back to back. The 9 altars hovered and rotated rapidly around them, and the green light emitted from the lamps made from baby skulls compressed into a green light screen that covered the area of 1,000 meters around them. One of the oracles snapped, "The king of East Sea Prefecture and King Baishan are dead. Why should we risk our lives? Isn't it good that we've settled our grievances? If you need any help from the Directorate of Celestials in the future, we will do our best to help you." Wu Qi snorted coldly. He glanced at the evil spirits that he could not kill with the blood centipede sword and said indifferently, "Oh? You don't want to fight anymore?" Wave after wave, the monstrous waves unleashed by catfish flood dragons smashed onto the green light barrier. The biting cold water produced large whirlpools that swirled around the green light barrier with all their might. The light barrier shook violently, and both oracles had an unsightly expression on their faces. The priest who had just spoken hastily replied, "Indeed. Although our clans have served King Baishan's bloodline for generations, there's no need for us to die for him." With a gloomy face, Lei Meng moved over and growled through clenched teeth, "You don't want to fight anymore? Do you think it's that easy? Your flesh, blood, and souls are all mine. Even if the bones of you oracles can't withstand the oil, even if your souls are not much different from those of ordinary people, I'm going to chew you up bit by bit." The fiend shadows made of human skins were still wreaking havoc on Lei Meng's body. Although Princess Zhanglu was doing her best to remove the curse, she could only slowly extract and disperse the monstrous evil power contained in these shadows. Lei Meng's body flickered violently, and from time to time, a great plume of plasma would shoot out of his damaged body. These fiend shadows had made him suffer greatly in the past 2 days. Even with his true form of a fiend god, he could not bear the terrible power that could devour his soul and destroy his bones, and even some of his essence energy was devoured by them. How could he not be angry? Wu Qi spread his hands helplessly and sneered at the 2 supreme oracles with a malicious smile. "Look, there's no other way. Lei Meng doesn't want to spare you, so..." The 2 supreme oracles sneered in unison and snapped, "Are you sure you can kill us?" 2 pitch-black supreme towers flew out of their foreheads, swaying in the wind and turning into pagodas several miles tall, hovering over everyone's heads. The 2 supreme oracles shrieked in unison. Dozens of beams of pale green evil light shot out from the bottom of the pagodas and shone on the 9 bone altars around them. A ghastly evil aura swept out, and countless evil ghosts darted out of their bodies, lunging at Wu Qi and his companions with bared fangs and brandished claws. These evil ghosts were the same strange things that Wu Qi could not kill with the blood centipede sword. They were no longer evil ghosts, but evil spirits of the yellow spring raised by these supreme oracles with their own blood essence and souls. Wu Qi's blood centipede sword was extremely sharp, and it contained a wisp of innate killing intent that could kill all tangible and tangible things in the world. But the evil spirits of the yellow spring were dead creatures, and their life force was hidden in the yellow spring. Unless the yellow spring dried up, they could not be killed. Wu Qi's cultivation base was strong now, but how could he possibly dry up the yellow spring? If he used the divine abilities of the Buddhist League, he could easily release these evil spirits from purgatory. This was the saying that everything has its nemesis. But in front of Lei Meng, Wu Qi did not want to expose all his trump cards. He still needed to keep the golden body of the Buddhist League, so how could he let everyone in the world know about it? Seeing that countless evil spirits were coming at him, Wu Qi immediately cried out, "Disperse your world, Lei Meng. I have a way to restrain them." Upon hearing that, Lei Meng opened his mouth and inhaled, sucking countless bolts of lightning from 10,000 miles around into his mouth. In just a blink of an eye, this part of the world collapsed with a rumble. Wu Qi immediately raised his right hand and waved it, then cried out in a low voice, "Fiend-slaying sword formation, rise." The true forms of 360 Kunwu swords flashed and disappeared in the sky, and then endless starlight poured down, as if the sky was pressing down from a high place. Countless big stars were suspended less than 1,000 feet above the heads of the crowd. Then, the shadows of the swords flashed in the depths of the ground under everyone's feet. Even through the rock stratum that was hundreds of miles thick, the traces of the swords could still be seen. All of a sudden, a great plume of natural energy burst out of the ground, which converged into a mighty sword energy that swept across all directions, forming an insurmountable forest of blades and swords around the crowd. Then, the swords flashed rapidly around the crowd. Driven by the energy of the 5 elements, the energy turned into an invisible vortex that wrapped around the 2 supreme oracles, whose faces had turned pale with fear. Only a handful of people in the world knew that Wu Qi had obtained the Kunwu swords and the legacy of the Yellow Emperor's sword formation, but the reputation of the fiend-slaying sword formation was known to all the human race. Seeing that Wu Qi had used the fiend-slaying sword formation to kill them, the 2 supreme oracles shuddered with fear and fell to their knees almost instinctively. "We didn't know that the king of East Sea Prefecture is the successor of the sacred emperor. Please show us mercy. We'll serve you faithfully in the future and dare not disobey you." Wu Qi pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "Forget it. You're only loyal to me because of 2 supreme oracles. If I kill you in exchange for virtues, I'll have a few more people around me who are as strong as you. They're much more reliable than you." The 2 supreme oracles were surrounded by entangled karma, and the fire of retribution towered into the sky. Their karma was thousands of times heavier than catfishes. God knew how many human flesh and blood sacrifices they had done over the years, and that was why they had such karma. Killing them in exchange for the virtues of the Great Path could at least allow a few people around Wu Qi to step into the realm of primordial. Compared with the 2 of them, Wu Qi was naturally more willing to trust his own people. The sword formation closed inwards. 2 shrill curses rang out, and the starlight in the sky flickered. Wu Qi unleashed his Dark-Een celestial tower, which covered an area of 100 miles in circumference and rapidly accelerated the flow of time here. A day later, Lei Meng's time in this world had reached its limit, and he was helplessly expelled by the laws of the Great Path. Wu Qi took over the control of the sword formation. Pangu's sacred energy burst out of his body, and the 360 Kunwu swords shone brightly, truly unleashing the terrible power of the fiend-slaying sword formation. Compared to when they were in the hands of Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others, the power of the swords had increased by more than 10,000 times. As gold immortals, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others could not control the swords at all. They could only form the sword formation with a wisp of Pangu's sacred energy that Wu Qi had injected into the swords. But in order to control the sword formation, Wu Qi had to do it himself. After all, the swords were the supreme treasures of the human race crafted by the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. If an immortal recklessly injected his immortal energy into the swords, he would be the first to bear the brunt and be killed by the swords. Inside the formation, it took Wu Qi 3 years to break through the defense of the 2 supreme towers and forcibly suppress the 2 supreme oracles. Their cultivation bases were far weaker than Wu Qi's, and the supreme towers they controlled were no match for the Kunwu swords. If Wu Qi wanted to kill them, he could have killed them with just 1 volley of swords. But, if Wu Qi wanted to suppress them, he could only slowly consume their magic power. The 2 exhausted supreme oracles were dragged out. At Wu Qi's order, Ao Buzan, Lord Xiansheng, Supremacy 3 Flame, Patriarch Jiang Yun, Patriarch Qing Xian, and Lu Qingfeng struck together and quickly turned the 2 supreme oracles into meat paste. The 2 supreme oracles had served King Baishan and done all kinds of evil. Now that they were killed, the heavenly Tao immediately sensed it, and an enormous amount of heavenly virtue came pouring down. With the help of the heavenly virtue, Ao Buzan and the other 5 immediately stepped into the realm of primordial. Wu Qi could tell that among the 6 of them, Lu Qingfeng had the hardest time entering this realm, and Ao Buzan had the easiest time. Almost as soon as the heavenly virtue entered his body, Ao Buzan transformed. He got rid of the huge black dragon head and stepped into the realm of primordial, then transformed the dragon head into a handsome middle-aged man with a dignified face. As the tribulation clouds slowly approached, Wu Qi immediately devoured them with the myriad harmonization grand magic. Ao Buzan looked up at the tribulation clouds, then condensed a water mirror to look at his current appearance. He looked left and right, reveling in his own image for a long time. At last, he breathed a deep sigh and said, "All the beauties under the heaven, no matter which race you are from, just you wait. Your big brother little fatty is back. Ha, the spear under Lao Tzu's crotch is going to be bathed in blood again." Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others were not as tasteless as Ao Buzan. They could feel the transformation in themselves. Chi bowed deeply to Wu Qi. Wu Qi, who was busy devouring the power of the tribulation cloud, nodded and smiled at them. There was a tacit understanding between them. Only Ao Buzan was shouting and moving his lower body forward. No one knew why he was so excited.